It's not much of an intro, but I guess we're supposed to say smile for the camera.
Yeah.
And my guest today, I typically like to have guests introduce themselves. We also met recently at SHOT Show, but Nick, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Nick. Um, I'm not really good with these, but I'm 31 years old. I am a United States Marine Corps veteran. I served in the infantry as a 0311 rifleman, transitioned out of the military into law enforcement. Started off my time in law enforcement as a sheriff's deputy back east, moved or relocated back to the West Coast where I'm originally from. Wound up in Arizona, worked in the state of Arizona for about 3 years. My total combined service time is a little over 12 and a half years. Uh, I deployed a couple times. I got in a couple shootings as a cop, and really all that over the last 12 years kind of wound me up to where I am currently. Uh, I currently work with JK Armament. I help with sales and then just networking for the company. But I also represent Badlands Munitions. They're like family to me, so that's why you'll see me wearing both today. Um,
We I think we kind of stumbled across each other. At least I did, because I've talked to Jake of JK before, and I've had a bit of I've known him for a little bit of a time now, and he's been on the show. But so I was at the booth, and that's how we got into conversation, and I enjoyed it so much that I was like, I have to have this guy on the show. And you
yeah,
told a bit of a you had a quite a story going on. When I mean story, I don't mean that even in a derogatory sense. And I'm wondering if we can kind of get into that in a little bit. But let's start with something a little bit lighter hearted. How much different was it? You said you deployed with the Marine Corps.
yeah.
I'm loosely familiar. I've got family and friends and stuff, but ultimately I'm from Army side, so oops. Uh this squeaky microphone needs to get fixed. But what was the difference in use of force and mentality and and like concepts of violence moving through different forms of law enforcement and then in and being in the military at different times?
Oh man, I was in the Marine Corps at like the time that the war was winding down. Um, so at the time, ROEs were pretty shitty from what my seniors had expressed to me. If they found a military age male with a gun in a bad area where there should be no bad guys with guns, they're pretty much cleared hot to engage. I wasn't there, so I can't speak on what they got into. Um, but during my time period coming up in the military, we were pretty much told, "Hey, you have to get shot at. You have to radio in. Hey, where did they shoot from you? Do you have a description on the individual that's shooting at you? Um, request to engage said individual, and so on and so forth." Which just seems night and day difference from what we were raised in that mentality that they were trying to instill from us from the time of boot camp to school of infantry to rifleman school to getting to our units. And then I had a secondary MOS during the first portion of my enlistment. I believe it was a 8152. It should be a Marine Corps security guard. And what that entails is being a you go to BSG, and then sometime during BSG they split you off, and based off of security clearances and where they feel like you fit their need, you can either go to the I believe it's Bangor, Washington, or Keens Bay, Georgia, but you'll go sit on Newt or like two nuclear facility sites, or you'll go to a fast team. So there was like Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Alpha is out of Spain, and they'll deploy from Spain to any of their respected areas in Europe. Bravo is in Japan. They respond to any areas in Asia, and then Charlie will deploy to CENTCOM anywhere throughout CENTCOM. I wound up in Charlie. All my seniors there were guys coming out of what we call the fleet, so Fleet Force Marine Corps, just standard infantry guys that were like going to like a sub B billet position. So they would bring all the exact infantry knowledge from their deployments and how they were raised, and they would get there, and they would get guys straight from School of Infantry that were now going through BSG, and they'd be like, okay, we have more of a defensive posture. We're not going there. We're not looking to do saturated patrols. Like, if somewhere gets hit, our job is to deploy there as a reinforced platoon with all our special equipment and training and defend it. Rarely do they ever get deployed, so they get a really bad rep. After you do your 2 to 3 years at fast, you'll get sent back to the traditional, like, line companies and Victor units. So, like, you'll just go back to being a regular infantryman. When you get there, at that time period, the Marine Corps would have it where, like, you would not only be a rifle qualified infantryman, but you would have a secondary weapon system that you were qualified on, like a pistol, which at the time, like, it was very uncommon for, like, a lance corporal to have a pistol in the Marine Corps. So I rotated back with my buddies after that time period. I came back more ribbons than my peers that were in conventional infantry units. I came back with more weapon qualifications than my peers. I came back with what they considered a cooler deployment. And then we promote based off of scores. So whatever they say, hey, this is the score. If you meet this criteria, you're eligible for promotion. So naturally, guys that come from fast, we promote a lot faster within the infantry for the Marine Corps. So when we get to our units, because we're not completely savvy on, like, digging a foxhole or buddy rushing or that form of fire and maneuver that they want to instill in us, we're hated right out the gate. So you get to your second unit with a little bit of experience, and then you're expected to kind of forget most of that and intertwine with these regular infantry guys that have been embracing more of the suck life. And naturally, it's really hard for them to like you. So it just takes time, energy, lots of sharing pain. Uh, being former Army, it's the same mentality. You get these new guys, you don't really start to care or respect for them until you watch them suffer beside you. Once
Mhm.
they've sweat with you, they've bled with you, and they've ate with you, you're like, okay, this guy's my brother now.
Yeah, it there isn't really there's a certain kind of pettiness that can happen in the military for sure, and you can see that in, like, the way that people interact in units with each other. But if you cannot earn the rapport of your peers, it is a very rough go. The time in the military is a very rough go, and there's no, like, let bygones be bygones kind of thing. So I think I might have been in just before you. I got out in 2013, and I got to see in all of my deployments in the military the rules of engagement change. And so, like, my first deployment was, although it was extremely slow and we didn't do anything, the rules of engagement on my first deployment were so vastly different than my fourth with 3rd Ranger Battalion that it actually drove a decent amount of people out of battalion, because they didn't want to deploy anymore like that. They didn't want to do it was kind of odd. And then, of course, there's not doing the career thing and making some decisions in the military. So but so you transitioned from a fast so you said you transitioned from a fast unit to, like, a big infantry unit.
Yeah.
um what For those of us who are not Marine Corps guys, then what kind of a move did that take? Like, change of duty station and moving all your belongings, and, like, were you married at the time, or?
No, so I wasn't married. I was it was actually kind of easy, in the terms of, like, logistically, it was pretty
Okay.
easy. We came back from, I was actually in Yemen. I spent the vast majority of my time in the Middle East in Yemen, which, for, like, a lot of people that don't understand the dynamics of the Middle East, if they've never been over there, Yemen is like the Harvard or the Princeton for, like, IED bomb making. So
Let's dig into that then real quick, because
okay.
I've been my deployments were Afghanistan and Iraq, and I what at that time, what kind of How did they develop your understanding of the area of operations and the different interactions? Would that go like?
So we knew, okay. So my first deployment was in 2012. Um, we knew that we were going to go to the Middle East. We knew we were gonna get on a plane in September timeframe, and we were gonna fly over to Bahrain, and we were gonna sit on a joint forces base in Bahrain, and then we would train. We would meet with other countries. We'd travel, and if they needed us for anything, we would respond. So we kept like 50% of our stuff on a pallet, like ready to go at all times when um and we knew that when we were going to go to Bahrain, it was going to be the same way. So at this time, I was on leave. I was back home in California. That's originally where I'm from. I was hanging out on the beach, and like I remember getting a recall text, and it was basically like, "Hey, everyone has to cancel leave. Come back to Virginia early." Um, and we were like, "What the heck?" So I called, like thinking like maybe this was a joke. Like you don't believe that, especially when you're like a new guy. You're just kind of dumb and naive. And they're like, "No, like you need to hurry up and get back." So we got back right around like I want to say the 8th or the 9th of September, and we just got told like, "Hey, get all your stuff ready. We're gonna leave sooner than later." And at the time, there's way guys that get paid way more and that make way bigger decisions than me. I'm just like, shut up and color. And it was around the 10th that things got real busy, and then September 11th of 2012 popped off, and the diplomatic outpost in Benghazi got attacked. And then that's when we got told like, "Hey, we're going to the airport." We got told that we were going to deploy in some mass effort to assist them at the which should have been uh, the Charlie Fast Marines. So there's 6 platoons in each fast. But we got told at the time, just because of the way like logistically it worked out, that one of the Alpha platoons was actually going to go to Benghazi and going to secure the airfield for the evacuation of the Americans with DoD. So one of the Alpha units end up going immediately. We load up on a plane, and like I remember taxiing, getting ready to take off, and like guys are looking at their phones and saying, "Hey, there's a firefight going on over there. Americans are being killed. Like we don't know what's going on." And I remember like we don't deploy with a conventional platoon leader, like lieutenant. Like we deploy with a very well uh, senior captain that's on their way towards promotion. All your squad leaders are like very senior sergeants, if not staff sergeants. Your platoon sergeant is typically a staff sergeant or gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. So like all the leadership within FAST is very well versed in like how things work and have big connections with what's expected of them. So when we're actually on the plane, they're communicating and talking to the ships in in the area of Benghazi. They're talking to the naval assets and figuring out where are you flying to? Are we getting on helicopters? Are the helicopters launching from ships? Like, what's the plan? So I remember like we flew in camis, but we had flight suits. I don't know if the Army ever issued flight suits on deployments.
No,
But
not in me. Not for me. Yeah.
so like I remember they were all like, "Hey, get out of camis. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're definitely not going to be allowed to go in as uniformed members of the military." So like we swapped uniforms, and then they talked about, "All right, stay in camis. We actually don't know what's going on." And then they're like, "We might change, we might not change. We still have no idea what's going on."
Which is, I mean, that's very indicative of the military, and not indicative. It's just it's like there are so many things going on, and this flight is, I'm guessing, is something like a 20-something hour, almost 30-hour flight for you guys.
Oh,
25, 17.
yeah, something crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
so like this isn't all happening like all at once, and it's just kind of changing every couple hours, and there's as the situation develops. But I do got to start with two questions, and one of them was, So you got recalled from California, and it was how many days between when you got recalled to when you left?
I want to say like 2 or 3. Like
And all
I'm
of
like
this was
slightly retarded, and that's a long time ago.
yeah, so but and all of this was around the Benghazi event.
Yeah, this was like days leading up to that.
So in the days lead so to those on the outside looking in, and I think at that point in time, let's see, I was focused on something else. I think it was because it was September. I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan for my 4th rotation. Uh so I was very. I think we were probably doing. I think even then we were probably doing some sort of field training exercise, kind of like end of the training cycle thing. So I don't. I wasn't. My attention was directed at that during the Benghazi time period. So they knew 3 days ahead that the attack was imminent or potential, and so they staged you guys, and it still ended with a debacle that was visibly a
Yeah.
stain. Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's interesting information because it's like another one of those events. Like the more we know about it, the worse it looks.
Yeah, yeah, the craziest thing for me is actually, like, watching the movie,
Yeah.
and when I watched the movie, I'm like, "Man, like, I wish they talked." Like, I know that, like, my role is, like, nothing. My role is a pebble of sand on the vast beach of
Hmm.
a coastline. But, like, I put that into perspective to people that are like, "Oh, man, that's crazy that this happened." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're like this looking at the movie. You don't understand what was going on." Like,
Hmm.
my unit was moving people, not to include just myself, but, like, other platoons were deploying. They were moving guys from that were supposed to stay in Europe to respond to Europe, moved in effort of that. Dudes already in the Middle East were moving, and then they deployed us ahead of schedule to move. So
Hmm.
and that was days in advance. So it's like, when you think of that, you're like, how much do we still not know on our level, but that they knew at that time? Like, I've seen phenomenal from the military to law enforcement, phenomenal intelligence packages about, like, an op or what's gonna go down, and
Hmm.
I've seen bad ones, but, like, we had to have absolutely have had some greater idea of what was gonna occur, and I feel like
Yeah.
we definitely dropped the ball with that.
There's it's a tricky issue too because I've been on missions where the intel was bad by and not an astronomical account, but like not even like a common sense issue. But I've definitely been on an operation or a mission where like this wasn't what was briefed at all. And then I've also been on the ground where the head shed or the leadership just makes decisions that are not the right decision, and it's a difficult job or it's a difficult position to be in to be making these evaluations because on the one hand you kind of expect something out of people, and then on the other hand it's the man in the arena, and if I'm not the platoon sergeant, I can criticize him all I in my head, so to speak, but I'm still not the one making the decisions. And so like it's an interesting problem. I think although the Benghazi issue is very clearly politics versus operations, and when the people making decisions have no skin in the game.
Well, obviously, there's, like, things we can't talk about,
Yeah.
with that, but I remember, like, so I'll get into it further. So, around this flight, back and forth, things changing, like, everyone's like, "What's going on? What's the head shed talking about? Like, what are they hearing that they're not telling us yet?" We landed in Spain, got fuel in Spain. It was real quick, like, wheels down, get fuel, wheels back up, and we actually flew from Spain into Bahrain. And we're like, "Okay, well, this isn't where we're supposed to go." And they're like, "Hey, we didn't get here fast enough. We already have Marines on their way out there." And then they're like, "But bad news is Sana'a, Yemen's getting attacked as well." So we're like, "Oh, like, why is this not being reported by, like, anyone?" And I tell people all the time because people are like, "Oh, Yemen?" Like, a lot of people don't even know where Yemen is on a map. Um, but while everything was going down in Benghazi, you had Yemen over here getting attacked. And you can actually go on Google and look it up now, and you can see like thousands of people like climbing over the compound walls, breaking the glass, lighting vehicles on fire. Um, that was an interesting beast within itself, but because that was actually a designated diplomatic outpost, that was very secure. Yemen
Mm.
was a fort. Um, it had its advantages and disadvantages, but the embassy there uh, was extremely secure in the sense of no Americans were getting injured, and because of that, I feel like obviously Benghazi got priority. We lost Americans there, and I don't want it to be taken as like I'm saying, "Oh, Yemen didn't get any credit because I went to Yemen." No, it got a different credit, and people forget about things. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. What happened in Benghazi was very unfortunate. It breaks my heart because I know that my unit wanted to go. I know that other units wanted to go. I think all of the DoD that was forward deployed or in preparation to forward deploy wanted to go. And from the things I heard from people that were able to get on the ground, things I heard from people that uh, escorted the bodies out of Benghazi, like the things I heard were heartbreaking and sad. And like when we get sad, we get frustrated, and when we get frustrated, it takes really good leadership to maintain like our emotional readiness, because like you can't fight if you're emotional, or you won't at least win off of emotions in a fight. So um it was like it was like getting to the Middle East knowing like what our job was, and then getting kicked in the nuts and like feeling sick to your stomach because like we didn't get to do something, and we knew like Americans died, and like our job was to defend these outposts.
Can you explain what you mean by you won't win if you're emotional, or can you expand on that a little bit? Because
Um,
I think I know I think I know what you're talking about, but I
I
haven't
just
heard it phrased that way before, and I'm quite interested.
so like my thought process behind it is like it's okay to be an emotional person. I actually feel like when we embrace our emotions, we have a better understanding of how to think. But at the same time, like we have to balance our emotions. Like I can't blindly get tears in my eyes and I'm crying because I'm sad, and I can fight you, because realistically, if someone's crying, it's obscuring your vision. You need your vision to accurately engage in a fight. So I think like emotionally, like inside when like you're sad, you're heartbroken, like you lost a buddy, or America lost a soldier or a troop or something, like that tears at you, and you get emotional because like it gets real. Like it's real when you're in the military, but it's a whole lot more real when it's like your area of operations and you guys are losing people. And, like, that was our area. Like, we didn't get to like, I had buddies that went there because they were already for the forward deployed, and we were deploying. Um, and so to see them broken was really hard because, like, at the time, like, I was young. I was like, oh, man, I don't even remember. I think I was like 19, 18, 19. Like, I didn't know any better. And, like, I think I'm a man, and I think, like, I'm going to go over here and, like, attempt to save the day or make a positive impact. But like watching all these like really strong men around me feeling defeated, like we weren't like feeling defeated, we weren't going to go out there and be an asset. We were going to be a liability. And it took really good leaders, like men that like I aspired to be all these years later. Those leaders pulled us out of the gutter, wiped the mud off our face, reminded of us of why we signed up to do the job, reminded us of everything that got us to that position, and told us, "Hey, like we lost the first round, but this is a grudge match. We're gonna keep going. We got rounds to win, and you got to win multiple rounds to win the fight." And so, like I don't know, like if you're not in the military and you've never experienced that, the best way I could say it is like, um, it means a lot. But UFC Leon Edwards, before he was the champion, he was fighting Kamaru Usman, and he was defeated. He was down. You could see it. He was a lost cause, and his coach got in his face. His leader got in his face and told him uh, to sack up. Like, no, do not give up on yourself. Do not give up on this team. Do not give up on the goals you have for yourself. You got to get back out there, and you got to show them why you are who you are and what brought you here. And like, don't remember the exact words, but like it was like it's emotional when I watched that. I was like, oh, I feel that. Like it pulled on my heartstrings because I've been in that role, and I've watched my friends be in that role, and I've watched good leadership come in our lives and tell us like, hey, no, like you got to wipe off, get back up. We have a whole nother round ahead of us.
Yeah, and so when you were at this time where your leadership was coming down, or your leadership was, it's not reprimanding or scolding. They were calling you to a higher calling, and calling you back to the mission field in the sense.
Yeah.
Did you had a lot of respect for them at that time already, or did you have respect for them before that?
I had respect from them, like
Okay.
almost from day one, because
Okay,
like
good. Yeah.
these dudes were like still to this day, like I reach out to them every once in a blue moon, and I'm like, hey man, like I just want to thank you like for what you did. Like they were so they were like the big brother or the dad that like I didn't have growing up because I
Mm,
came from a broken family.
mm,
So like everything I saw about the military, that brotherhood, like watching like Band of Brothers, The Pacific, like all these movies, um, those are the leaders you would follow to hell.
mhm.
And you know that they would sacrifice their well-being. They would sacrifice their tomorrow for yours. And like when you see it and you can genuinely feel the positive energy that comes from these men, you know, there's nothing you wouldn't do for them.
How did your leadership establish that? Because we say things like respect isn't given, it's earned. And what were some things when, as you entered into um, their unit, what were some ways where they, I'm not saying established respect, but fostered that mentality? How, because it's not a given. It's not a given. Like where good leadership is rare, and I'm very happy for you to
Yeah,
hear,
so I
because that.
got I got super fortunate. One of our NCOs at the time was an East Coast Marine. Two of the other NCOs are the three other NCOs. Um, they were West Coast Marines. They all came from different units. One like they all have their each like thing. So like one was like inner city kid from the Bronx who like grew up on the streets. It sounds funny, but like one of them's from the Midwest, small country town, like married his elementary school sweetheart, graduated from a class of like 10. Um, and then the other one was just like a wholesome, like very religious, like he never cussed. I remember like this is further into the deployment, but one time he's red in the face. And we're like, oh, we're gonna hear the first cuss word. And he dropped frick. And then he's like, he's paused and he's like, I need to sincerely apologize for that. But I'm gonna let you know. And the worst part is how he followed up with it was he's like, I'm not mad at you guys. I'm just disappointed. And that hurt more than anything he could have said because we're like, we disappointed this man. Like,
Yeah. You
but
know,
it's just like they were all three just um they were all just so different in their own individual ways. But the thing that they all had in common was they led by example. So
mm,
if we had PT at 5 a.m., they were out there at 4:45, ready to go. They never told you to be somewhere early where they weren't already there before you. Like everything that they did
mhm.
was on time. Like, oh, if you're gonna be there, I'm gonna be there before you. If you're gonna suffer, I'm gonna suffer. Like, when I rotated to like big Marine Corps infantry years later, I saw guys that were like senior lance corporals, or corporals and sergeants, and I'm like, how did this like shitbag promote? Because they're just like hanging out in the smoke pit, chain smoking, like in their barracks room, like dodging work. But these dudes, like, they were nothing like that. They saw the good and the bad of the big infantry, and they're like, hey, when we get to this unit, we're gonna instill these disciplines and these behaviors that we know will make them good guys, and hopefully they take it and they run with it and they flourish with it. And
Yeah. Like, so one of the things the military is famous for is negative reinforcement. You know, like getting smoked and getting your shit pushed in and having to do, you know, like everything from movies and television to the experiences we've had where there's always, well, at least, you know, I imagine you encountered some of the hazing of like coming into the unit, which is kind
oh
of, you know,
yeah,
there's always going to be some of that, that in some elements that functions as a micro rite of passage. And there's all, but the one thing I've been that you're not story, but that you're talking to me about your history is that, um, were there examples of positive reinforcement where somebody like you had leadership that scolded you when you were down, but also told you when you were right? Was
yeah.
that
So like I remember like very well, like we trained a lot. So a little to explain it because it's gonna sound like, oh, it's very cookie cutter, like you guys held hands and they loved you and it was kumbaya. It wasn't like that. It was like we worked a lot, we shot a lot, we trained a lot. I shot more live rounds of munitions when I was at FAST than I did in big Marine Corps infantry. I trained way harder in FAST than I did in big Marine Corps infantry. Like I remember, even through all that training, they were like explaining us how like the Marine Corps like evaluated us, and they're like, we got to make sure like you get evaluated. The Marine Corps wants you to get evaluated this often. So prior to evaluation, we're gonna do like a pre-talk, and like we would be in the field, and I remember our sergeants would be busting out their notepads and being like, they're right in the rain gear, and they'll be like, hey, I evaluated you on this. We're gonna debrief on this, but I just want to let you know, good job, keep it up. And then they like, so then you're like, oh, he sees me crushing it. That feels good. I'm gonna work harder. And so like
Mhm.
you'll be in the field however many days and like morale's going low, but he just reminded you like, hey, he saw you busting ass. And like it gives you like energy. Like the way I can explain it, have you ever felt the force push on a ruck march? Do you know
It's been
do you know
it's been a while, but
See,
let's.
so, you know, like, when, like, you or a buddy, like, you're humping, you're moving gear, you're traversing some, like, crazy terrain, and, like, you just start feeling yourself slowing down, but then your buddy comes up to you, and you just see him sweating, and he's in the suck with you, and he, like, just kinda puts his hand, like, not really, like, pushing you, but, like, he just, like, just taps you, and then
Yes.
you're like, "Oh, for it," like, and then you just start trucking along. It's
Yes,
like,
yes.
I call it the force push because, like, that's how I felt like their reinforcement is like, "Hey, like, I see you, just," and then you're like, "Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I see."
I had a squad leader. What There's a small version of that too, because we were doing a 12 mile for time march, and I remember because the whole thing was a debacle. The time, the day that it was happening, the weather was bad because it's the military. It's going to be bad, and the person who measured the distance measured incorrectly, so it was not 12, it was like 13 miles, and it was for time too. So if you didn't hit time, you got, well, there was a risk of you losing your position in battalion. And I remember just sucking one foot in front of the other. And my squad leader at the time is just doing the same thing. None of us are having a good time, but he's got his phone in his chest rig, his roadie, and it's like Cage the Elephant is playing, and it's just like, oh, okay, we're gonna make it, and so and we finished, and the whole squad finished, and we all had blisters, and it hurt for a couple of weeks, and then we carried on. It was the only time I think I ever got blisters in a bad ruck march.
Need moleskin.
I was blessed with tough feet, but apparently I found out that they're all bent inwards. So I
Oh
got to
man.
get that checked out. I don't know. So,
Yeah.
but
No.
so I know like that was a good example of a guy who he as a form of leadership was really good at taking you aside and being like, you're doing a good job, do this better, and
Yeah.
then also grabbing somebody and being and reprimanding them appropriately. And I'm interested to hear more of that.
Yeah. So one thing that actually developed very on um that I saw. So he has the coolest name ever. So like my first leader ever was Raider Wayne Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I could not tell you, like, I think somewhere along the lines he was just raised to be like Captain America. Like he rode a vintage cafe racer bike to work every day. He was married. Like his wife always wore a dress. She would come to base if time permitted, and they would have a picnic together. Like he was a classic gentleman. He wore like a leather jacket all the time. He wore a scarf, the race goggles, like, and he was a PT stud. Like you could not break him. You could not be faster than him. Like he was the guy. He finishes his timed event and he runs back to go grab the guy at the end. Like
Ah,
he's a motivator. Like that's all he ever wanted to do was be a Marine and lead men. That that was his only desire in life. And he found the girl of his dreams, got in the Marine Corps, meritorious promotion at PFC, or he graduated boot camp, got PFC right out the gate, became a like meritorious lance corporal, meritorious corporal. Um, and then because of his MOS, he was an 0350 when they had really weird cutting scores at the time. It took him forever to promote, but I finally got to see him put on the rank of sergeant. And like I watched, like this man, he was very in line with his emotions. I could see like in his eyes, he was crying, but they weren't watering. Like he was just like, I achieved what I wanted to achieve. Like, but like multiple times in my adult life, post Marine Corps, I've reached out to him and thanked him because I'm like, whatever happened in my life was a direct correlation of how he raised me. Like, I look at him very much like he was the big brother that stepped in when there wasn't a dad in place. And um, like, I love that dude. Like, I've bumped into him years later. Like, I can't say enough good things about him because he was the poster boy of the Marine Corps. Like, the Marine Corps should have slapped him on everything. Um, like, I can't say anything bad about him, but he was a firm believer in, hey, if you mess up, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable and we're going to work on why you messed up. And then I'm going to let everyone know that I'm not putting you on blast, but I'm going to give you the extra work and people are going to see you. People, because you didn't work hard here, um and this cost the team or the platoon or the squad, it costs them X, Y, and Z. We're gonna go show them that we're putting in that work. So there'd be times where he'd pull me aside, pull other guys aside, or maybe even the whole squad, and he'd be like, "Hey, I know we just got off work, but I think we got to go put a 3 mile boots and utes run under our belt just to let everyone know that we're working a little bit harder, and let them know that like we're going to be stronger next week." And like, command is always like, "Oh, I want to give you like a libo brief." And then it's like your captain and then your commander and then so on and so forth. And then you get told the same thing by like 50 people before you get released for the weekend. Like he was very much like, "Hey, look, if anything happens, you guys got to be there for each other. If you need me, I'll be there. Um, but we have morals, we have rights, and we have obligations. And I know who you are, you know who you are, and there's a line in the sand. And there will be consequences for our actions. So we're a family. Understand that you represent our family. with all that you do this weekend. And before he would let anyone go, he'd be like, if there's any problems from this week or today, this is your moment to confront your teammate or your squad member, because we're going to say it now and we're going to squash it, because next week it's not going to get brought up. There's going to be no bad blood between anyone.
Mm.
Um, and it's those things that he did that I carried with me for the rest of my time.
Were there ever any situations where, as you're saying, there's no bad blood, like you had things that you had to settle those days, or was it? I mean, I would expect
Oh yeah.
generally. Okay, okay,
Oh yeah.
good, because I'm interested in that too. The going back to like kind of inside military culture, the safety brief. You said that you called it the libo brief, I think, and because I'm Army, dude. I'm
Yeah. No,
Ranger
no.
Battalion. So the safety brief is very stereotypical. It's always some sort of kind of poorly phrased innuendo, and like, don't get anybody pregnant, and don't get sick, and don't do this, and don't drink that, and all this kind of stuff. It's like it's almost like I remember them being oftentimes like comically crass, and then they would try to go. There was always some dude who tried to like take it to a whole new level of degeneracy, and you're like, okay, man. But it's interesting that your leadership identified, because we saw a lot of that positive reinforcement too, which is like, hey, I don't care what happens, you call me and we'll figure it out. Just don't get in trouble. That's kind
Yeah.
of, there's definitely the double-edged sword, or not the double-edged sword, but the two kind of hands of, I'll cuff you, but I'll pull you out of the shit. But it's interesting that your leadership at this point in time was already emotionally, mentally leadership aware to be, is there any bad blood between the guys? Because that takes courage amongst a bunch of people who really like to call themselves alphas.
Yeah.
And I know that language is even antiquated now. Like the whole alpha thing is kind of 2015. So
Yeah. No, it's and it's dumb things like you took too many smoke breaks this week and you didn't fill up sandbags and you didn't do this and you didn't
sh-
do that.
yeah,
And
but you had opportunities to call each other to the table.
yeah, and so, like, that would come out on Friday, and then, like, you can tell, like, if you were like, sometimes, like, I would say like, I would be mad about something, but, like, I can see, like, as we're, like, in, like, a circle, like, looking at each other, I could see, like, heads nodding, like, okay, they saw it too, they know that, like, maybe I'm justified in why I'm mad at so and
Hmm.
so, and then they, like, sometimes they, like, look at you like, "Really? This is what you're mad about?"
Sure.
With them. So it gets squashed, and then there's times where it would be like, "Okay, do you feel like you wanna apologize, or do you, like, wanna punch it out?" And he would be like, "Alright, like, you guys got mouthpieces, let's go put on gloves." Or we would wrestle. Like, he would
Hmm.
let us get it out, but it was in a controlled environment, and then when
Hmm.
you were done, you shook on it, and
Mm.
you swallowed your pride. You either said what you said and backed it up, or you said what you said and you both were like, "Hey, yeah, I'm wrong, you're wrong, or we're gonna," but whatever it was, whether it was settled on a gentleman, whatever it was always ended on a gentleman's handshake.
Good. Yeah, very well done.
And,
There was no time. There was no resentment was allowed to build.
no,
No.
he crushed that. Like, I've tried at so many opportunities and so many roads, like, when I moved on from him and that unit to my new unit, and then I moved into law enforcement, like, I tried to bring that with me at every opportunity, and people have a hard time, like, first responders, they all think they're alphas. We very much know that not everyone in that realm are alphas, but they have a hard time being like, "Oh, well, I don't wanna sit here and talk about my feelings and talk about you, like, I just hate you and, whatever, like, I'm not gonna back you up on a call," or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've all had the experience, but there's a common one to be like the fat cop or National Guard guy who thinks his shit doesn't stink, and
Yep.
he gets a moment to have authority, and he now decides to swing it everywhere he can,
Yeah.
and you see that happen often, or and I think so. Like I've spent many years in sort of the private contracting arena, even though I really don't look it, and the one thing that's consistent is that the people, your reputation, is what drives you there, and it in many ways it precedes a lot of people. And there are characters who will come into the arena and with their background, their resume, and their ego, and they'll very quickly find themselves on the outs, even though they are technically skilled to fit the billet, because character or their way that maybe they just don't get along with the group or something like that. But there's other issues that presents too, because you see it happening in what am I trying to say on how this one goes? I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I just and I find it not talked about very often, actually. The and I'm and the level of putting it away, putting away your ego and your resentment. I hear often, and it's a good reminder. But how to prevent the buildup of resentment in a culture is very pertinent to today's conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of our flaws, just naturally
Hmm.
as men that have gone forward and taken an oath to a bigger picture. We just have a hard time talking about a lot of things. I feel like when you sit here and you talk to guys, they don't wanna sit here like, it was weird, like, me and you connected right away at SHOT Show, and then I, like, was just talking, and then I noticed, like, you leaned in, and before, like, we were just both, like, shaking our heads, and everyone was looking at us like, "Oh, these guys are, like, on some telepathic conversation right now." But, like, we were agreeing on a lot of things because, like, it wasn't that it sounds weird to say, but we both allowed each other, as meeting strangers, to be vulnerable, and we know at SHOT Show I heard it multiple times. I got SHOT Show, like, I would see someone and see how they dress and see how they acted, and I would, like, look at their, like, name tag, and I would try and see who they were there with, just
Hmm.
so I could kinda, like that gives us a bigger picture of, like, who maybe they are.
Was this your first time at Shot Show?
This was.
Okay. Yeah, that for context. Some people do it for clout and some do it for context. So like I've worked in a media capacity before, and so I'm going to
Yeah,
look at a person's badge, so like I know who I'm talking about to, or I know maybe they work for this company. I'm like, hey, do you know? I usually talk to like Steve.
yeah.
How do you know Steve? And so like that just allows us to build a little bit of in a sense rapport or common context, and it sounds like it's like a technical masterpiece of like, or not masterpiece at all. So that's arrogance. I gotta repent to that. But it sound it's just simply like rapport, common ground, like making sure I know where I'm at in the maze. Yeah,
Well,
okay.
when
But
I was looking
there are
I was
certainly some people who like they're like badge checking to kind of like figure out where they are in the hierarchy. But I'll be very clear, those are very rare now. Those are very rare.
I was looking at this guy's badge because, like, I
Hmm.
thought I recognized a tattoo, and in our community, like, tattoos can mean a lot of things. So,
Hmm.
like, I was looking at a tattoo, but I couldn't really see it, so then I looked at the badge because it was, like, more, like, like, centered towards me.
Yeah.
So then I read it, and he's like, "Don't worry, like, I already read your badge too to see who the bigger badass is." And
Thanks.
I was like, "That's not even why I'm here." So, like,
Yeah.
I'm here to have a good time and network with people and, like, help people.
Yeah.
Um So that had
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. But, like, I heard him say it, and then, like, during SHOT Show, like, for a week, I would hear other people say things along those lines, and I'm like, "That's not why we're here." And
Yeah.
that's why, like, I feel like guys have a hard time talking about it. The
It,
companies that they work for and represent have a hard time talking about it,
it,
and a lot of us allow those egos to grow.
someone
Um,
someone's got to do this at Shot Show, and they got to have like a button, like kind of like the easy button on their thing, and it's just like the oof button or
yep,
something like that, where someone's like, "Oh yeah, I badge checked you too," just "Brrr,"
yeah.
blows confetti in their face, and it sticks to their eyelids, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And then everybody knows who they are. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah, it just, I feel like in our community, we eat like, the military, law enforcement, first responders, private security, and then you get all those guys, and they all get tied into the gun sector and the firearms industry, and we're just like this giant melting pot of at some point, we became interested in guns or carried a gun. And
Mhm.
now all those egos clash and no one wants to talk about their feelings and everyone has to just like measure each other's dicks and figure out like we're better than you. Like I ran into that. Like I was wearing the JK hat. I was going out to places and I heard from a lot of people like, "Oh, you're a JK, blah, blah, blah." And then like they automatically tried to like undermine the company, undermine me, undermine people I work with. And I'm like, man, like it's really not like that. Like, do you even know like how the company got started or do you know people at the company? And I had to further explain. I'm like, we don't want there to be bad blood, and we're trying our hardest on our end to be a place where, you know, there's veterans working there, there's guys from all branches working in the company, and, like, we go out. Some of us party, some of us don't party, some of us drink alcohol, some of us don't drink alcohol, but we know, just like when we were in the military, you can have guys from all different walks of life, share very few things in common, but they drive forward for the success of the mission. And so like I was actually able to meet with other people not only in the firearms but within the suppressor manufacturer side and like squash a beef that no one really knew why there would be beef there. There would be like, "Oh, well, we thought you didn't like us. Oh, well, we thought you didn't like us." And, "Oh, you thought this." And it's like, "No, like, can we just get along?" Like, and I told so many people all SHOT Show. I felt like I was a broken record. I was like, there's so many people outside of these walls that hate us. There's strength in numbers. I need you to be my brother, and I need to be your brother.
Yeah. The gun culture does have its sects, like SECTS, or its corners for sure.
Yeah.
Um, for SHOT Show specifically, I've noticed that mentality is on the decline
Mm.
of the kind of the beef and the well, you stole this from, and you're this, like the kind of assumed animosity. I believe it's on the decline, and some of that might be guilty of my position, but um outside of SHOT Show, I'm familiar with. I've met people who do this, and you're meeting for the first time. You might have a job together, or you're meeting for let's use some sort of security framework. You're private. You're not your private military contractor, your PMC job, and your your leadership assigns you to what you got to do, and you're in a two-man team, and it's the first time meeting your teammate, and he decides that the way that he's going to build rapport with you is to mutually hate on some other guy. um or talk shit about something like, oh well, did freaking team leader tell you this? Well, he's a dumbass and we hate him because he's dumb and he's going to get replaced because he doesn't know how to do billing or something like that. And you're like, that's a really weird way to develop a camaraderie with somebody, is like mutual disdain. And I've seen that in multiple arenas. And I've seen it in the firearms industry, gun culture as well. Is like, oh, do you hate Lucas Botkin, or do you hate GBRS Group, or do you hate Slade, or do you hate Huxworks, or is it do you think Palmetto State Armory is dumb, or do you like, and that's the mutual, that's like the delivery mechanism that people use to try to build rapport with one another, is mutual disdain for something. And it's kind of petty. Like it's a it might sound even like responding to ego with ego, but if that's how you approach it, I immediately assume you're a second class citizen. Like it's really, it might sound really shitty, but if we go out into the field together, and it doesn't, and like, some people, they'll have issues, we'll say stuff and we'll talk about it, but if that's your method of developing rapport with your team, by complaining about somebody else's team, and I'm guilty of this because I've complained about my own shit before, and I was on a deployment in the capacity of being a private contractor in a not a prestigious position, but a respected one. And I was talking to a guy who was well my senior, well more expected, and I was expressing to him frustrations within my own work environment. And he turned to me and he said, "Stop doing that." He just said, "Stop doing that." Like he said, "Stop doing that. You're talking shit about your team right now, and you need." And I can understand. He was very clean on. He's like, "I can understand why you're frustrated, and yes, your frustrations are legitimate, but stop doing that. Stop talking like that." And this is a one-on-one. We were out at the range shooting, and it was not like he wasn't like publicly disgracing me. He was very, I was younger, he was more mature, and he corrected me on it. And I appreciate that to this day, because while my criticisms may have been correct, there was no reason for me to tell him that, and it was not making myself look good, or it kind of like, it's not that it wasn't professional, it was just, whatever. And so like I am thankful that he was more mature enough to tell me to, because to kind of leave your qualms at home, be professional, do a better job, work together with other people. And this was in a high threat environment where we had multiple nationalities and we had multiple issues. And so but he very, very sternly corrected me, and to this day I'm thankful for it. I have no idea where he's at in the world, but I appreciated that. Where this idea of like camaraderie by mutual disdain, I don't think that should survive. And I know the gun culture and like the industries and the companies will have conflicts between each other. Um, that's because that's just what people do. However, I find it really hard to take seriously. I find it really hard to take people seriously when the fundamental component of their idea is somebody robbed me, or we can't be friends because you work for that company. It's like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wish I could say like I didn't ever complain about a company or complain about a person. Like I'm not perfect by any means, so I've been guilty of it in the past. But it takes guys around us to tell us like, hey, like you're kind of stepping out of line, and like bring us back down. Because
Mhm.
I notice like it doesn't matter if it's me or someone else, but whenever we go down those rabbit holes of talking bad about something or someone, you start to like get very energetic, and like your levels rise, and you start like raising your voice. Um, and like I say, like you get big headed and you start to float away. So it's nice when like someone kind of brings you back down and like is like, no, we're here. We're not talking about that. So
Yeah.
when you mention like how he did it to you, like I've had buddies that pull me aside, people that I respect. Um, one of which is like a civilian, never in the military, never in law enforcement, but he's just like he loves guns. He's just a patriot, loves guns, loves America, loves what America should stand for, and he's all about like being a prepared citizen, doing his role. Um, and he pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, man, like I love you to death, but like I don't know if you caught it, but you were kind of like starting to talk bad about someone, and I know that's not you. I know you don't want
Mm.
and before you go and do that, I don't want you to change your reputation and someone else perceive that as like, oh, Nick is this.
Mm.
He's like, because I know what you are and I know you're not like that. So I'm just gonna help you snip that. And I was like, hey man, like it sucked because like no one ever feels good about like, oh, I just got like told like I was kind of in the wrong.
I mean,
Um,
especially when it's a moral character. Like if someone told you, "Hey, dude, your push-ups are too low," or whatever your exercise is, you're not doing enough. Like, "Hey, your bench press needs to be 250 and you're at 245." You're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go to the gym." But they're
yeah,
like, "Hey, you slandered somebody," and you're like, well, I can't just bench press my way out of this," and that
yeah,
sucks.
it does. And it's like your throat feels tight and you're like and like you start like trying to like get your breathing back in rhythm, and you're like,
Hmm.
all right, like how do I recover from that? And I feel like the best way to recover from it is just like do good, like talk about the good things, talk like um I get told from a lot of my buddies, and this isn't me stroking my ego, but they're like, "Man, like, you always try and plug, like, one of the friends, one of the homies," and I'm like, "Yeah, because, like, I'm gonna be genuinely happy for my friend's success." So I always, like, if I feel like someone's talking bad about something and, like, I'm cautiously aware, I will try and talk good about something else. Or I will, like, they'll be like, "Oh, this photographer sucks." I'll be like, "Oh, yeah. You know a good photographer? My homie Nomad." And, like, I'll tell them, like, "You should reach out to Savio. Like, that's a good photographer." They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, but, like, F this guy," and I'll be like, "Oh, but he can do that, or he might know another photographer that can do that." And so then, like, I try really hard, and, like, I want to continue to try harder to do that. Like, if someone has a bad experience somewhere, it's not that I'm robbing them of a customer or whatever. It's like, I'm just gonna tell you from my experience, good people, and if they're good people, naturally, I'm gonna gravitate and try and become their friend, and, like, I want to promote, like, good behavior, good conversations, good topics, and just I feel like the more good we plant within our community, the more good that will grow. So we gotta nurture that growth.
It's yeah, I'm a little bit at loss for words because it's like, there's maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the whole kind of community building element of gun culture became really strong, and I've seen people succeed. I've seen people succeed quite fantastically, and something that was different this year about SHOT Show, and I kind of left in my mind, is that we can be happy for one another's successes, and that should not be a novel concept. And I'm not saying I'm not novel in producing it, but that consistency of bringing encouragement to one another is uh, something that I guess I've asked you a couple times in this episode on leadership, providing both the negative and positive reinforcement, and our community and our comradeship, if we want to get in that direction, um, requiring both. And sometimes I think going out of your way to say something kind to somebody else, especially in our environment, that's genuine, sometimes requires a bit of, maybe not courage, but something akin to courage. Like it's almost, it's like it's easier for me to razz you, like, dude, you're a Marine. I know, it's great. What's your favorite flavor of crayon, or some sort of low level fruit like that, and it's entertaining, and we have our small. It's an inside joke, but it's like, I appreciate your attention to detail on this subject. Thank you very much. And I'd like to foster more of that, even though we might eventually reach an event horizon where a little live, laugh, love about it. But the constant negativity that you can find out there is counterproductively the kind of people that we separate ourselves from very quickly. Like, if
Mhm.
you're, and I have been that person, but yeah, like, not everything's a psyop, not everything's a lie, not everything's false, not everyone in this industry is not a shill or a thief or whatever. It's not all corrupt, it's not all going to hell in every single category. It's, we find problems and we fix them. So uh, I'm going to pivot a little bit, but before I do, I have to ask you one more conversation, which is completely disconnecting. And that is, you said while you were on this, as a Marine, you deployed and you kept half of your gear on a pallet, I'm assuming. Yeah,
Mhm.
like on a big metal pallet, netting and everything.
Yep.
And that was like your breaking case of war pallet. You're in the event that we're going to get called into something, that's what we grab. Um, so what was the did you just throw all your, like, crap magazines and your Rhodesians on there and you keep your plate carrier, or what was on, how did you separate those two? Because there are
Um,
times where we would deploy with something like that, but we just filled the bin with all the shit that we didn't use, because it's like plate carrier, Alice pack, magazines, like all my kit that I need for an actual mission, and then all the extra stuff that like might be very specific for one thing or another would go on that pallet.
So there's multiple pallets, but we just referred to it as a pallet. But like you explained, they're large metal pallets on wheels that can go in the back of cargo planes. We kept crew serves on there. It was
Okay.
it was guarded all the time. We were all expected to be riflemen by trade, like glorified security, like by trade. But we had cami netting on there. We had empty jugs that we would fill up with water on there. We had cases and cases of actual bottled water, which we later learned was really bad to keep exposed in the sun.
It's
But
not
like,
service related.
yeah, no. But we just kept like, hey, you can survive, you can do all your regular stuff. Like we kept extra uniforms on there. But it was just basically like, hey, like you need to learn how to live out of like a glorified sea bag. Like live out of your sea bag, and anything that you didn't absolutely need to take on deployment with you can stay back in the States. And then if you can't live out of the sea bag, but it's like other gear like that needs to go on this. And then that there was always two guys on that pallet. That pallet was always like when we were in Bahrain, obviously that pallet was near where we like our sleeping quarters, which were really nice. Bahrain is an incredible base if you've ever been. Um, but we always had guys like rotating like a fire watch duty that basic what's in the Marine Corps is just like two dudes always watching every hour you would replace them. So like those guys would have to like miss out on like a training evolution of some sort to make sure that and they would fall back in and pick up wherever they get left off. But no, it was quite interesting times. And I would like to get more into like the whole like military and stuff. I know like I'm kind of all over the place and I don't know if that's like those are the TBIs talking. My brain's just like trying to figure out how to blend everything together.
No, you're pretty solid. I wanted to ask about that one because it was an interesting, like, having all of your kit, having a bunch of kit on a pallet is sort of a military internal formality where, like, I've definitely deployed where we had something that stayed on the pallet, never left the pallet, but it was like stuff we never needed, and it was pretty rare. Because we were using all of our equipment all the time, and so they were all in the ready room, and we unloaded everything. But having a kind of a speedball or something like that ready to go in case we got pushed out somewhere, um, I think sometime I was sitting here thinking to myself like, well, was your plate carrier on there?
No,
What was your, like? Did you just, is that where you kept your, like, your chest rig? Did you have a chest rig and a plate carrier, and what? Huh, it's a different problem because just it was an it was maybe it was an inside thought that should have stayed an inside thought.
no. I think I learned that there's never really a dumb question. I know that it can seem dumb to other people, but
Let's
a
put
lot of
that to
times
the
people are
test.
just afraid to ask the question, and then that when like, I've been in that situation where I wanted to ask the question, but I was like, "Man, I don't want people to think I'm dumb," and then, like, someone will ask the question I wanted to ask, and I'll be like, "Yes."
Yes.
They looked bad, not me. But, I actually if we could take a little break, I just have to run over there.
We talked quite a bit about military, kind of like a kind of inside the military and then inside the industry, some questions. And uh, what was it like going from your military experience to your law enforcement experience? And where are you at? What, I'm not where are you at now, but like what? Because you said you left the military and then you went into law enforcement, and but you moved around a little bit and you ended up in Phoenix or
Yeah.
Arizona.
Yep.
And then what was that like? And what was it like in your head? Like, how did you think about it, and how did you make decisions, and how did you change from rules of engagement and rules of force over here to like looking at it in this in an under an maybe in a new light or in a new arena?
So this is like, this is where I kinda have a hard time explaining it, but like I feel like it drives the message home for like those that can relate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you get out of the military and like I saw everyone do it. Like I saw people that were older than me get out because their contracts expired. And then you're like, that guy hated the military the last year or whatever. He could not wait to get out. And then you see them on social media and they're talking about freedom, like finally. And then shortly after, it's like, I miss my boys. Like I miss having like a set schedule. I miss having the opportunity to uh just be a part of something bigger than myself. Because it's not all rainbows and sunshine and everyone have a good time. And when you get out, a lot of people have like an identity crisis when they get out. And uh, we just spent the last few years of our life thinking we're all these like badasses that when we transition out, we don't think like we can talk to regular people anymore. They don't understand us. They don't understand like the way we've been programmed to process and analyze things. And I got out of the military feeling like I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to accomplish in the military. I got out feeling like I didn't get that. Like I heard of like all my seniors talk about the invasion of Iraq, like hand to hand combat, like weapons malfunctioning when they're pieing a corner and like having to get hands on with insurgents and like carrying their buddies that stepped on an IED like back to cover and like I felt like I was like the military chewed me up, spit me out, and I didn't get the opportunity to feel that glory, to be baptized by fire. Um, and I so wholeheartedly wanted that. I wanted to know, do I have what those men had? Um,
How many times have you had this conversation with somebody who was also in the military who had a similar experience? Not, I mean, not how many times, but
um, I want to say a lot, but like very few, because not everyone wants to sit down and be vulnerable like this. Like you, in the sense, yes, you're interviewing me and we're talking, but you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable because you're allowing a direct form of communication for you to hear something I may say that may trigger like a feeling or a thought.
yeah.
Um, and not a lot of us want to do that.
I think there is a certain group of people who are in a similar, like mentally have a similar evaluation of their military experience. That there's a certain group of people who went in, felt like they got chewed up and spat out, and they never had their kind of, let's call it baptism by fire or rite of passage. And they compensate that by overexerting some sense of ego. And they're not, but I really think that that group is not, I think that's an overrepresented group. I don't think, I think it's rather, it's difficult to have this conversation in a
No,
meaningful sense.
it is like so no, it gets difficult and like my wife and my immediate family members, whenever I talk to a veteran about this, they see it and they're like, "Oh," like they can feel the 1 second, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You
I
well.
had to text for a charger because my computer was telling me it was gonna die.
Oh no.
Didn't want
That
this. Didn't want it to die, especially during this point.
yeah. No, I'm glad
Oh,
you caught it because I'm glad you caught it. Thank you.
yeah.
So but you were saying.
So like when they see me talk,
Mhm.
like my wife sees it, and she's like, "Oh my god!" Like every time it happens, it's like, how do you randomly find another veteran, and you have the ability to get them to drop their walls, be vulnerable with you, and then I listen to two people that have had different walks of life, but then like you have the similarities of military deployments, feeling a certain way, and then doing something crazy with your life. and putting so much, like you're gambling your life constantly, um, to satisfy this itch that you have like in you. And she always says it in way better ways than I can because I'm not good with my words.
Says the guy who's the guesting. Yeah, sure.
But
Let's go with that. You're so bad with words. Thanks.
like I don't use big words.
I have a degree in using big words, so I get to talk down to people. It's just I didn't get a good paycheck. I just got pretentiousness.
No, it's but she says it and like I
Hmm.
can see it in her eyes that she feels like every time I do that with like another veteran or first responder, like it makes her like cry a little good tear, and she's like, I know you just took some burden off of your shoulders. I know you took like you talking about it is so good for you.
Mm.
And she feels like every time I talk about it, she gets a better version of me. My kids get a better version of their dad. And that's why like I try and talk about it more because like if I can inspire one person to talk about it and give their loved ones a better version of themselves, then I'm still continuing my service after service. And
Mm.
like I'm giving back to the bigger cause.
You don't have to have a title to give to the community or
Yeah.
to your give of yourself. You don't have to have a title to give of yourself. Yeah. Okay. So, um, before I had brought in an example, so you said you left the military, felt like it kind of chewed you up and spit you out, and you didn't have that opportunity to be baptized by fire. And then you were how did that you were already out of the military. What is it a story beat next? Is it what happens next, or is it is that
Um
do you need to finish that thought?
yeah, so no, so I applied like I was back in California. Uh I my last duty station in the Marine Corps was in California. So like I was kind of like right before I got out of the Marine Corps, I was like pretty close to a civilian already because like I would leave base and go home. Like I was like an hour ride away on my motorcycle. Um so like
Because
mentally like I was like preparing to clock out and I thought it was just going to like I was just going to go back to Orange County and like wake up in the morning and surf and like go to community college and do what like all my friends getting out of the military were doing. Um
your last duty station was on the West Coast.
yeah.
Okay.
So then I was just like boom and like me and my wife we had got married before I got out. So we're like, okay, like this is pretty easy. Like you're good. Like my family owns a construction company, but like I didn't want to go work for my dad because like I'm like I was in the military, like I don't need to work for my dad. So like I went and worked with my friend's dad. He owned a business and like I had worked with him in when I was in high school. So I just went back to doing like electrical stuff. I went back to doing low voltage like communication wire for control panels and like the money was phenomenal. Like there was great money in it, but like I was waking up and I was jumping in a car and I was commuting 2 hours a day to a job site, then I would be at the job site and then I would commute back. And like I don't mean to disrespect it at all. Like we need people doing blue collar work. Um but like I was so unhappy with myself. Like
Mm.
I was battling myself day in and day out, like, "This isn't what I wanna be doing. This isn't what I plan to do for the rest of my life." Like, I need to get back like, I need to get back into what I'm going to do, and I had already during this time, I had already submitted applications to a bunch of police departments. Um, but, like, the average hiring process was, like, 8 to 12 months at the time, like, pretty much in every department that I wanted to go to. And a buddy that I wrestled with in high school had relocated, um, back to, like, the Southeast, and he was like, "Hey, man, like, how is it looking for a job in law enforcement?" And I was like, "Ah, dude, like, it sucks, like, I'm not hearing back from people, and, like, I'm just down in the dump." And he's like, "Dude, my department's getting ready to look for, like, incentivize military people. Like, most sheriff's offices that you go work at, like, they'll stick you in the jail. You'll go to the academy and then you're lucky to go straight to the road. You're pretty much going to stay in the jail as like a custodial deputy and help with the corrections officers. And that sucks. And like, I did not want that. I was like, no, like I want to get hired and go straight to like, I want to be a beat cop or I want to be a deputy.
Yeah, well, stop wasting your talent. Stop wasting. It's like the bureaucracy of the state is so bad at managing talent.
It really is. And I was like, man, like this is weird. Like, do I want to pick up and move again? I was already on the East Coast, back on the West Coast, get out. I'm already home. Like everything was there. But this calling was like, hey, here's your chance, here's your opportunity. I went out there, man, in 2 weeks. I went from like 8 to 12 months to 2 weeks from like the time I submitted my application to the time I got a conditional offer of employment. And I was like, huh, this place either really sucks or I'm just really freaking lucky. And I got hired, went to the academy, did like an accelerated academy. I hit the road and like, I remember when I was in the academy, I was like, oh, where am I going? Like, I have no idea about this. Like, I'm living with a buddy I went to high school with, and like another one of our friends had moved out to there. And so all three of us are renting a house. Meanwhile, my wife and my daughter, my year-old daughter are in California. They're waiting for me to graduate the academy, save up money, and buy a house, and then they're gonna move out there. So like I'm like, okay, like I'm still like I'm sacrificing things again. Like I'm back in the military. Like I'm gonna hit this hard. I was in the academy and they're like, hey, like these are the positions within the sheriff's office that when you guys graduate the academy, you guys can go. And I was like, "Whoa, where's like all the action at?" Like I remember asking the person that was like gonna assign us like what schedule we were gonna get, and they're like, "Oh, it's like this zone 5 place. Like it's it's like city. It's like on the edge of the city part of the county, but then it like touches to the county, like the more rural side. So like you get like a very diverse like area to patrol." I was like, sick, like sign me up. And they're like, all right, like you gotta be careful. Like I'm a small dude, like I'm not the tallest dude, I'm not like the buffest dude, but like I was like, all right. And everyone's like just like right off the bat, like be ready. Like every dude that's out there like is gonna test you, is gonna try you. They're gonna want to provoke something with you because you are the exact opposite of everything they are. And now like in my head, I'm like coming back to my military days of preparation and training. And it was like, they would always talk about it in the entire military. Like if you're a clean cut, like, oh, not clean cut, but if you're very like organized, very well prepared unit, the enemy's watching you. The enemy's gonna be like, ah, man, those guys look shit, like they're hot. Those dude, like, they look well put together. Like I don't want to fuck with them. But if you see like this, like unit patrol by and like their packs look like shit, they look like shit, they're fat, they're out of shape. You're like, I'm feeling froggy today. I might go fuck with those guys.
Yeah, well, it's like easy prey or what's another way of saying it? Like you're not a threat. Like
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. Like I get it in a condition of, even though it wasn't really a war, but the war, like yes, the idea that people don't make such evaluations is not respectable.
Well, like I got really like entwined with like, like talking to people, like getting out. I'm like, it's like the whole hearts and minds of like the whole operation in the Middle East. Like I would get out, like, and I would try and learn, like during the time in the academy, like I would go eat in an area that I knew I was gonna patrol soon. And like I tried to get my face out there and my exposure out there and like listen because I wasn't in uniform. And I was doing like my own like intelligence gathering. Like I was learning from the people. I was blending in the community and I was like, okay, this is what I'm coming to. And so then I go through the academy and again, like the academy instructors, uh like some of them were like they didn't care. Like they're just like it was a cush job with it to be an academy instructor. And then there was like one blessed soul who got hurt in the line of duty, and that was his only way to stay in the department because he couldn't patrol anymore because he had broken his back. And he day in and day out would try his hardest to like PT with us, to motivate us, to be like, hey, you're not like, you have to be an asset. Like you cannot be a liability. Like, and what he told me, like, will stick with me. His name was Dave Willer. Great man. He would tell us all the time. He's like, people don't see police officers on their best day. Something horrible is going on with them. So in their moment of need, how you respond, how you look, how you act, how compassionate you are towards them in their moment will stick with them for a lifetime.
Mm.
So I need to mold you into the best version of yourself to help these people. And he set a standard. And then same thing with my leadership, like my Sergeant Johnson, when I was in the Marine Corps, like these guys are molding us and making us and refining us and setting examples with us and showing us like, I achieve it as your leader, therefore I expect you to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it really helped promote like who I wanted to be as a cop. And I was like, okay, like I want to be a cop because I want to chase bad guys. I want to fight bad guys, and like I want to see if a bad guy is willing to try and take me out in a gunfight. Like I wanted one, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, you think you're gonna get in a gunfight?" Like there's guys that go their entire careers without gunfights, and from the time I joined the department to the time I was in my first gunfight was 8 months. And it wasn't because I went out looking for a gunfight. It was just like I naturally volunteered to patrol a bad area. I volunteered to be proactive. I volunteered to respond to calls. Like every time a hot tone came out and it was an alert for like uh, a robbery, an assault, whatever it would be, I tried my hardest to get there first. Like, and I'm not like saying I'm better than anyone. There was plenty of people like me too, but there was also plenty of people that were scared um, to be the first officer on scene. They were scared because they didn't want the paperwork. They were scared because they didn't want to go hands on. They were scared because they didn't know the unknown. Like the unknown's scary. Like the unknown, like open door, armed suspect just entered into the building, and like you get there and you're like, huh, I can wait for backup, or I can go in there and I can clear this building and like save who needs to be saved, or do the job that needs to be done. Whatever the dynamics of it may be, is I always wanted to be there. Like I wanted to get there as fast as I could and try and shape the outcome.
Absolutely.
And I think that was me. That was that whole like I want to get baptized by fire. Like I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going into the unknown. Um, but I remember this is like 2018 time frame. Um, I would watch like donut operator videos of police shootings. I would watch like I grew up watching the Magpul, like Travis Haley carbine videos. I remember like BLS training, CLS training, like self aid, buddy aid, corpsman aid. Like I remember all these things from the military, and I transitioned them into law enforcement with me. And then I tried to like further adapt my training. So I was like, I'm gonna go buy this gun. I'm gonna get this holster. My department didn't even issue flashlights when I got to my sheriff's department. So I went and bought my own Safari Land. I bought my own Streamlight TLR1. I bought like all this gear to better myself, and I was like, I need a tourniquet, and I would have a tourniquet on my belt, and other deputies would be like, they used to talk shit, and they'd be like, oh, you got your little Batman belt, you got your little Coyote Tactical Solutions burrito with the tourniquet on it, and like you could have your med kit in there. It was a little IFAC, and they'd be like, "Oh, what do you think you're gonna do? Like, you think you're gonna save someone or save yourself? Like, that's stupid. Like, just wait for fire right there." Like that was the mentality, and I was like,
There might have been a glitch. Just wait for what?
"What part?"
You said there might have been like an audio glitch on my side. These people would criticize you like And they would say, just wait for what? Wait.
Oh, just wait for fire to respond. Like, wait for, the firemen and EMS to get there. Like, you don't have to patch people up. You don't have to, like, glove up. Like, you don't even need to carry a tourniquet yourself. Like, the fire department will get there and, like, patch you up.
There is a time where you defer excellence or you defer specialty to other people. I understand that the sentiment of like don't take on more than you can chew kind of saying, but I don't see that as what's going on here. It's a
It
it's
was
an
it
yeah.
it was a very weird time frame. Like, I was a new cop. I wasn't from there. I was from the
Mhm,
West Coast. Everyone there has an accent. Like, I was by no means, like, it felt like I was checking into a new unit again.
mhm.
It felt like I was starting all over again. They didn't care what I did in the Marine Corps. They didn't care what training I had. Like, I was a new cop, like, shut up and color. Um, and especially, like, I was in an area where, like, I was one of the smaller cops out there. Like, I'm 5'6". I think I was, like, 130 pounds at the time. Like, no one cared about anything I said or did, and I would show up to, like, muster, like, before we'd go out on our shift, and, like, I knew people would, like, talk shit about, like, they talk shit that I had a flashlight, they talk shit that I had a handheld, like, a small handheld, mod light, or
Mhm.
at the time, I was using one of the handheld Surefires, then I got a mod light, then I got a freaking cloud defense. Like, things have progressed, but, like, I've always gone out of the way to, like, buy my own tool, like, use my money. That was another thing. They would be like, "Oh, the department didn't give it to me, I don't need it. It wasn't issued, I don't need it." Why would I don't make enough money, why would I spend my own money on that?
You know, I have to make this observation and zoom out a little bit. So you're describing yourself as somebody who wanted to go do the right thing, was doing the work to equip yourself with the equipment necessary to do it, and working above and beyond the minimal skill and capabilities uh, um, for your position, so to speak. And yet it seemed like everything is against that. And I want to take you out of the picture because it's not just about you, but I think it's actually quite amazing how our environment in the United States is so antithetical or oppositioning is so it so opposes doing good, doing the
Yeah,
right thing, doing good. It opposes it at every at it seems like at every layer of analysis. The world that we live in cries for people to be heroes, but as soon as they do it, it's they're the bad guy. Like you know, and maybe that attributes to one of the reasons why, like, I'm not a big fan of Marvel movies. It doesn't mean that I hate them, but I just kind of find them milk toast. I was never a comics kid, so it's kind of like football. I never was interested in football, so seeing a Super Bowl thing doesn't really mean anything for me. But what you're talking about here is, it's just like I'm sitting here thinking, you know, if our police organizations were had some modicum of dignity, they would desire that, and then they would defend their own people who go out of their way to make their lives better. And like on the ground intel, why are you a busybody? Getting your own kit together, why are you a gear queer? Getting your having your own understand, like having an assertive mindset, why do you got to fight everybody? And I find that mentality really interesting because you find somebody who's got a modicum of not assertiveness or dominance but ambition, and everybody shits on him as soon as they possibly can. That is what it's like to be an American, especially in this kind of environment where your legal system opposes you, your government opposes you, your industry supports it at times, but okay, you know. And I just I find that a very interesting observation, and not one that is too uncommon.
it's not because, like, in multiple points in, like, my law enforcement career, I would get told by, like, burnt out cops, like, "I used to be like you, and then this place sucked it out of me."
Then quit.
Like,
No, I mean, there's a difference between being worn out and being and finding time to refresh yourself. Like there is a difference between that, and I'll be firm on this one in that sense. If you're apathetic on the job field, find a new job.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't. Maybe it's different though, because when you and I enter into that position, I think we languish. We start like not suffering, but we don't necessarily get to like the sit back and relax apathy where like I don't care anymore. They took all my joy out of my job. I think you and I start suffering. At least I think that's how I've observed myself, is like I start self-destructing even.
Oh, that's why I got out of law enforcement.
Okay. Go
It's
on then.
it's but all these things, like I'm just putting in the extra, like keep in mind at this time, like my family wasn't with me. Like I was out there with roommates, guys I went to high school with. And I was trying to for like be all that I could be. I was trying to be like the best version of me. Um I was training one of the roommates that I had that worked at the department with me. We were out shooting all the time. And we would get made fun of like, "Oh, were you nerds at the range, like the county range this weekend?" Like that's what it was. Like we were just nerds because we wanted to better ourselves and we wanted to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, but if you wear the badge, it is now your duty as an individual to prove the world wrong that you know how to shoot a gun. Because I like not I have met plenty of really really fantastic shoot cops that are capable of shooting, but everybody knows you're like 1 in 50, or
Oh,
you know what I mean, 1 in 100, man.
y- you,
And
you know you've like I wish wholeheartedly that you as the civilian could go onto like a live camera and watch every police range in America on qual day.
I mean I might be from a different position where like I've seen some of it,
But
but
like you can see the look of defeat on cops' faces when they show up to the range because they're like, "Man, I haven't qualled since last qual," or like they're scared. They are like, "Am I gonna meet the bare minimum qualifications? Like, am I going to fail?" Like that
what
was never
what are some examples of the qualifications? Let's give some context for the audience.
just being able to draw your pistol for uh, an allotted amount of time and engage the target at distances, just like the course of fire.
Can you
Like,
give me an example of the numbers? Like you have to have a 2.5-second draw on a 10-inch target at 8 yards,
oh,
or
like 3 rounds at 25 yards in 15 seconds from the holster. Like 25 yards is the limit that you shoot with your pistol.
what kind of target are you shooting at?
You're shooting at a humanoid target. You're shooting
Like
at like a
like
human
an
target.
like an IPSC, or just a very standard, 40
Yeah,
inches kind of thing. Okay, so you've
yeah,
got 15 seconds to draw a handgun from a holster not concealed,
not concealed.
and hit a target at
25 yards.
25 yards. Okay.
Yeah, and you'll
And
you'll do and then you'll
you
do
just
one
have to
more.
hit the target. You just have to hit it.
You just have to hit inside the scoring ring, which is like
Okay. Yeah,
from the
it
shoulder.
CD zone kind of thing
Yeah,
on
like a
an IPSC.
modified D zone.
Sheesh. Okay. Yeah. No. Like that's good. Okay. And that's an example of what a qualification would look like, and people are nervous about that.
Yeah, people have a hard time, like, there will be people like, okay, so
Let me.
you do.
Can I interrupt you one more time?
Yep.
Was there ever an experience in your life where the very same person who called you names, which sounds petty, but like ragged on you for going to the range and learning how to shoot, who also couldn't pass the qual? The
Yeah,
exact same person.
yeah, they would almost always be one of the people that would fail.
Oh, well, I mean, it speaks for itself then.
It's,
Like,
it's literally their own insecurities coming out.
did you ever have any opportunities to kind of not 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 turn the tables, but improve their outlook in life, or were they a lost cause most of the time?
Um, some, like, I get into that with like for like explaining that post my first shooting.
Okay.
But it's just like it's like there's obviously other drills during the course of fire, but like
Yeah.
the whole purpose with it, like when I would show up to those courses of fire, like I would see like my buddies, like people that were like-minded like me, people that would train, spend their own money, their own time, their own energy. And I'd be like, "Hey, dude, like, you want to cover down? Like, we'll shoot right next to each other, and we're like, we're shooting our qualification, but we're gonna see who could shoot it faster and more
Hmm.
accurately." So now we're taking it up a next step, and we're having a good time. We weren't stressing out. Like, we knew we were gonna qual. It was just like I wanted you to force me to bring out the best version of me. So it was like we were shooting alongside of each other, and like we were cementing and like reinforcing our relationship as like, hey, those dudes, they give a fuck. They care.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like, oh, like we were trying to like be like these gunslingers and we were just looking like they were just some cops like itching to get into a shooting. Like shooting as a police officer is like this much of your job.
Hmm.
Um, but shooting and being comfortable with your firearm, knowing that you are capable of using your firearm as a police officer makes you way more skilled in knowing like, "Hey, I don't have to take this to lethal force."
Yes, absolutely.
I feel
Yeah.
like when people are scared of their abilities to defend themselves and others, and they're scared of their shadows, those are the people that we would see with the most uses of force.
Oh no, absolutely. Those who are the most skilled, there is a inverse relationship between capability of violence and use of violence, and you see this across our population. Most comically, where I see it is, we all know the kind of the bar fight metaphor, where like the guy who's at the bar talking about being violent and kicking your ass is usually not the guy you need to be concerned about.
Yeah.
But most, like in even almost like domestic terrorism issues or open source information, there is a not strange, there is a commonality between those who are least capable of actual capable violence, or skilled or trained or whatever, who are very willing to advocate for it on social media. And I don't know if if you're on Twitter or X or at all or whatever, if you use that platform at all, but there is a, let's just, that's going to be too derogatory. There is a identifier of personality. There's a cast of people. It's not breed, that again is too much. But there is an ideology and a mentality of a certain type of person who is willing to go on social media and threaten somebody with force, or to call somebody else to do force on their behalf, who, the more likely they are to make the inverse relationship between skill and capability and willingness to call for violence or use force inadequately, is so strong that that assume at this point that if a person is going to, I can't say that completely, but it's reasonable to look at people who make threats on social media as being dangerous but not capable. They're dangerous because they're incompetent.
Yeah.
It's even very, it can even get more simple, but I know exactly what you're talking about. The officer, the cop, or whatever, who's just not very good at using his tool. He's not confident in his capability. The person who's into CCW or whatever, they're not confident in their skill, are much more likely to escalate force beyond what is appropriate to the situation.
Absolutely.
So let's stop training our cops and give them DEI training. Yeah, that'll work. That you're literally making it worse.
Yeah.
So, okay, sorry. You caught me on a
No,
on
no, no, that's what I like about this conversation. Um, but I feel like now we're fast forwarding, like, so I'm a cop, I'm out, like,
Mhm.
I have buddies that are like me, I'm not special by any means, but
No.
we're small in numbers, meaning, like, there's not a lot of people with our same mentality, and even the other dudes that may train, it's clicky, so we're just learning, or trying to become better. Like at this time period in the firearms community, like the hot ticket item is like sub-second draws from concealment, like the RMRs, like the optic of choice, like people are just getting into red dot pistols. Um, and we would carry those, and like people would be like, oh, like you need all those gizmos and gadgets to qual. And we're like, no, like this is where the evolution of like carrying a firearm and being a prepared citizen and a prepared police officer and like all these things are starting to evolve and intertwine. And so um I'm learning, like I'm using open source information on the internet as a tool to train me and my friends. And what's very funny about that is like I would warm up with like B8 targets, and then I was doing like dot torture targets, and I would do like aim small, miss small mentality, one-handed shooting, injured shooter drills. And then we evolve into um now around the time of my shooting, um, I had vacation, like my family's living with me now. I have vacation scheduled. We're gonna fly home to California and visit our family. Um, so like we're like, oh, you just got to make it through this last shift, and then you go on vacation, and we're going home. And I was like, okay. And my buddy's like, hey, you want to go shooting before work? And I'm like, yeah, get some dry fire in. Like I dry fired. Go out there, buddy. Daddy, sorry. I dry fired before shift, and I would do pull-ups with all my stuff before shift. Like I would, like you put on all your gear and you make sure everything works before you go out to do work. That was the mentality, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll go get some reps in before work, just to stay sharp. When we went there, I don't know why, but I decided to do injured shooter drills. Um, and later, fast forward to later on that night, I don't know if it was just like I was burnt out from work or what it may be. But I was under a supervisor who would not let me, I was working night shift, would not let me conduct traffic stops on vehicles until midnight. Midnight rolled around, from midnight to 6 a.m. I could go stop however many cars I want within reason, like obviously have probable cause and stuff. But so I'm like itching. I'm like, I want to go find something, but I'm about to go on vacation. So do I want a bunch of paperwork? So like, it's like 11-ish, I like, or 10-ish, sometime around there. Like, I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna be able to do this if I want, but I'm not feeling it. So like, I text the wife, and I was like, I'm just ready to come home. Like today's not it. Like I just feel weird at work. Like something at work is like telling me like I shouldn't be here right now, and like maybe I should just call out sick and go home and then go on vacation. She's like, no, like you'll have fun. Like go try and like get a car chase or something. Like you're gonna be able to pull over cars in 2 hours, and then before you know it, work will be done. I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. So I drive. This is a funny thing. I drive to the gas station. I walk in. I'm a deputy at the time. There's two state troopers there, and they're getting gas, and I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? And they're like, not much, man. What about you? I have a Milky Way candy bar, and I have an energy drink. And I'm like, this is my energy for the rest of the shift. I'm trying to get a car chase, so maybe I'll have to call you guys on the radio to come help. And they're like, oh yeah, man, we'll be in the county for a little bit longer, and then we're gonna take off and head home. We were on the detail. I'm like, okay, cool, yeah. Well, hopefully I don't need you. Go back to my car. I take a bite of my candy bar, take a sip of my energy drink, and I'm looking up, like, and I see a car just set through a whole intersection light cycle. I'm like, that's weird. And it's like the only car at that intersection in front of me. It's like they see me and they don't want to move. And I'm like, that's what we call a clue.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like, okay. So then I wait, and the light turns green again, and they're real slow to turn and pass me. And then as they both pass me, they're like making a conscious effort to not look at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
That looks odd.
Yeah, so I like slowly pull out, and I get beside them, and as I'm coming up to them, I look at the license plate, and the license plate is fictitious. Like it's totally fake. At the time, the state had transitioned into like whenever you would purchase your vehicle, the dealership would submit paperwork to the state for temporary registration, and it would print on a special sticker. Like the sticker was like a non-tampered, like a tamper-proof sticker. If you attempted to like rip it off and put it on a different license plate, it would dissolve because it would
Okay.
lose integrity. So like if you saw those on cars, like you knew like, okay, that car's registered, and we could look up the temporary registration. They had like a dealership plate on the back of the car, and they used a Sharpie to attempt to like make a fake sticker. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's the probable cause right there. So like the light turns green and they don't go. They're on my right hand side. I'm in the middle lane. I'm like, so I start driving, and then they start driving. So I see them behind me. So then all of a sudden I tap my brakes and they fly past me, and I get behind them and I hit the lights. We're on like one of the main roads in the county, and they barely like they creep into like one of like these side streets to go into a neighborhood. Um, and this was like one of the main roads that I was always on. Uh, and I was like, this is weird how they pulled over. Like normal people don't pull over this way. And I could just see like you could cut the tension through the air. Like the windows were not tinted. I could just see the female driver like real tight, and the male driver was real tight. And like, I was like, this is freaking weird. So like I tell dispatch where I'm at. I proceed to get out of the vehicle. I walk up to the driver's side. And I tell people that have never been in a gunfight, like like I feel like because it's happened to me at multiple times with the gunfights I've been in, you live life three different realities. You live life as it actually happens. You live life where everything around you is happening really slow, and then you live life where it's like an out of body experience where it's happening very fast and chaotic. And so depending on how you like stop and pause and think about like how that transpired, you can almost recall it all the same way, but just like the time difference, the chemical cocktail of like all the endorphins getting released, and like you're in like that fight mode.
Mhm.
Um, I get up to the driver door, and I remember like to me, I thought I said, "Hey, I'm Deputy Nunes with blah 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 sheriff's office. The reason why I stopped you is the fictitious license plate. Do you have your license and registration?" And I remember like she takes a deep exhale, and she like grips the steering wheel like super tight. Like I could literally see her hands, and like to me, I felt like in that moment, like it was like, whoa, like that's not normal. And she goes, and she reaches for the glove box. And as she reaches for the glove box, I just see him come out from his hoodie like this, out towards the window that I'm at.
Mhm.
And I thought he like for whatever reason in my head, I'm like, oh, this dude's trying to punch me. And so like I'm like, whoa, and I moved to like get out of the way, and I sucked behind the B pillar, which in the car, that's where like the driver and passenger seatbelts retract from. And like I suck up into the B pillar, and all of a sudden it's pow! And like my face is instantly on fire. Um, like I don't know why my face is hot. My eye is like I can't even open my eye. And I'm falling backwards, and I land on my hand, and I broke my wrist. The back of my hand is touching the back of my arm. It looked like a thawed chicken wing. And I'm like, holy fuck.
But
Like,
that's your left hand, and you're right-handed?
yeah, I'm right-handed. Um, and I fall to the ground, and I remember falling to the ground, and like I go to put my hand to like push and like crawl towards the back of the car. And in this moment, like it's like happening in those three different realms, and like I'm just like boom, 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 and I'm like I need to get to like my tactical advantage. Like I need to use this vehicle as cover, and I need to dump rounds, and I can't hear what it sounds like to me is like it sounds like I'm hearing zoop, zoop, like just like zipping past me, and I'm like holy shit, like in my head, like I'm like oh fuck, this dude's like trying to kill me. I get back to the like the back of the car, and I just like pop up, and I go to like put my hand, like marry my hand as like my gun's coming out, and like I just see my hand like this. And I'm like, oh fuck. I like bring my hand down, and I'm just like do a box like a modified box drill,
Mhm.
and I fucking sink 3 rounds through the back windshield into the back of the driver, like hit her and then transition and graze him. but it was enough to change the tide of the battle.
Mhm.
I put a wall of lead towards bad people that were trying to kill me, and I engaged both of them, and I was able to start putting rounds in their immediate areas to inflict pain, if not end the threat that they posed towards me. And I remember them like the tires spinning, smoking, and them fucking bolting off. Like they're like, "Oh fuck, he's shooting back! Like get the fuck out of Dodge!" And they take off. And then like I'm like now I'm coming down like from like I'm like, whoa, that was like very fast. Like from initial contact to end was less than 18 seconds.
Yeah.
Like
That's it.
they
Yeah.
just like dude just tried to fucking blow my brains off, shoot me in the face. What had initially like I didn't know in the moment of, but when he fired off that round, I took the muzzle flash from a snub nose 38, like at point blank. Um, and so like that's what like I got like unburnt powder like in my face. And so
Mm.
like my face is on fire, my ear is ringing. That round had actually like I have photos I can show you. Like I can't post them on the internet, but from the whole crime scene, that first round actually had just grazed the nicked the edge of the door at the B pillar. And that changed the flight path of that bullet.
Mm.
That bullet was coming at me, hit that, went away from my face,
Mhm.
and I'm standing right there at it. And I took part of the jacketing, and the jacketing hit me. And so, like, I was like it happened so quick, like, you're
Mhm.
like, "What the fuck did I get hit by?" Um, and then, like, I don't know, like, I didn't even wanna look at my face because I'm like, "Oh my fucking god," like, I just got shot in the face. Um And now, like, they're driving off, I'm trying to get to my radio, and I notice my radio is, like, knocked out of its pouch, it's, like, banged up, so, I grab it, toss it, get on, and, like, I try and get out on the radio, but 2 dudes are talking on the radio. So, like, we can't step on each other, so, like, I have to wait for a lull in their radio communication to, like, transmit out. And, like, I would like to say, like, I was, like, cool, calm, and collective, but, like, I'm trying to talk, and now I'm getting frustrated, and I'm in pain. And so finally, when they shut the fuck up, I get on the radio and I'm like, uh, 5313 shots fired. And like, it's like quiet. Like, I'm like, fuck, did they not hear me? And then I heard someone come over the radio and they're like, what did that unit advise? And then the dispatcher came on and she was like, 5313 just advised shots fired. And then it was a pause and they're like, okay. And then it's like, beep, all units be advised, 5313 has advised shots fired at his location, and they throw out like where I'm at. And so now it's like everyone jumping on the radio, like no radio etiquette. Like I'm on my way, I'm on my way, I'm on my way. Like no one's shutting up to let me talk. So finally I'm like trying to talk and like I'm able to get out and I'm like, get off the radio. This is what I got. This is what they look like. This is what happened to me. This is the direction they're going in. So like we need to set up. Like I knew that whole area. So I said, if they're going in this neighborhood, they're gonna pop off out of this exit or this exit, and they're gonna end up on this road. And they're probably headed in this direction to get to the bridge to cross into South Carolina. Because at the time, I don't know if it's changed, but South Carolina and Georgia, they have a hard extradition rules. So like it's really hard to extradite criminals back and forth across state lines.
Mhm.
So like I'm like, we need to set people up. And like people start like catching on. They're like, everyone wants to go to me, and then people want to go look for these guys, vice versa. Like I remember the first guy that got there was a lieutenant at the time. He was on his way to like a off-duty job. Like they needed a police officer there. So like he wasn't really dressed in like his full uniform, and he gets there. I had like gouged like a fat portion of like the meaty area of like my hand out from when I went to brace my fall. And as I fell on that rough asphalt, like it just took off a bunch of my hand. And now my hand's like this. So my hand's covered in blood, like drenched in blood. It's not like how it should be. It's like over here. And I'm like holding it and like still like trying to hold my gun. And I'm like this, like waiting for like them to come back. Like it didn't like pop in my head to like jump in my car and try and drive one-handed and like find them and shoot them like um so like I already knew like we were like starting to like close a circle on the suspects. Like the noose was getting tied around them and the jig was like gonna come up. So like people come to me and they're like, "Whoa, like what happened?" Like people thought like when they pulled a gun, like maybe I like threw my hand and it nicked my hand and that's how my hand got messed up. And everyone was like trying to like figure out like my injury and what it was. And I had black gunpowder on my face. And um what was crazy was I had trained the whole time prior to going to nights on swing shift, like the middle of the day shift. And one of the guys that I had actually got really close with on swing shift, he was a Marine. Um, and that was like our common ground, and that's how we were able to like mend a relationship or build a relationship. He actually had gone home late that night. They get off typically at 11. This happened just after 12, and he's actually in the next county over where he lives, and he's in his driveway getting ready to like close his computer. He just finished up his report, and he's gonna go inside and enjoy his time off. And he goes to close the computer and he sees my call sign and he sees like every available unit in the county like on their way to me. And so he clicks it and sees um, that like it advises like I've been in a shooting. He pulls out of his driveway and runs lights and sirens to me because he's like, that's my brother, like that's my friend. Like he knew like he was done for the day, but he had a moral obligation to do what's right by me because he knew like I would do the same for him.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Like we do this for one another.
So he shows up. He gets to the scene, like there's people talking to me, like all investigators, like camera crews are set up, like federal agents that are in the area that heard the radio traffic. They're all there. Like now we have this big task force for like, hey, these dudes just shot at cops. Cop shot back. They're probably injured. We need to figure out where they are. And then they're like, hey, you need to go to the hospital and get checked out. And my buddy's like, fuck that. He's not riding in an ambulance. Like, I will drive him to the hospital. And they're like, they're like, no, like, we're going to send these ambulances to the wrong hospitals. So if the news tries to follow him, the news is going to go to the wrong spot. So, like, my buddy and one of the investigators, like, sneak me off from the scene to the hospital. And I didn't have my phone. And I was like, dude, like, I need you to go get my phone. It's in my patrol car. And he found it next to that energy drink and that candy bar. And he laughs because he's like, you were trying to have your like last little treat before you got into all this fun. And that's like a running joke. Like he'll text me from time to time whenever he sees that candy bar anywhere near that energy drink. And it's just like a little thing me and him can like relate to. That's that like military humor.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And what made it so crazy was like my wife had just had hernia surgery. So like she's in bed sleeping, like cannot really get out and take care of our daughter. This dude reaches out and calls every person from swing shift and is like, hey, before the news puts it out, like we don't know what's wrong with him. Like we know that like his hands messed up. We know that like his face is a little messed up, but like they're taking him in, they're taking him into the ER. Hold on. They're taking this dude into the ER. We need to go get his wife and kid. They need to be here. And we don't want them to find out any other way. All these people come up, get changed, go to my house, help my wife get ready, get my daughter, and they bring them to the hospital.
And she doesn't know what's going. Does she know that you're alive?
She woke up to them at the front door and then,
Yeah.
like, hey, like, Nick's okay. He's at the hospital. He was in a shooting. We don't know more than he's breathing and he's talking.
You ruined my vacation.
Yeah. And so, like, she gets there. And, like, at this time, like, I'm not, like, crying or anything. I'm just, like, processing it because I'm like, oh, like,
Okay.
that was really up close and personal. Like, we were, like, at any time and point, we were either 3, 4, maybe 6 feet apart, like, fighting around a vehicle. And it was fast. And so, like, I'm just, like, processing it. I'm like, what could I have done better? Or, like, what did I do wrong? And, like, naturally, that's, like, the military of us. Like, so like I'm already like Monday morning backing myself. And then the door opens and my buddy gets up and he like goes over and hugs my wife and she's crying. And then like my buddy picks up my daughter and puts my daughter in the hospital bed. And she's not even 2 yet. She's like 1.5. And she like crawls up to me and she's like holding my hand because my hand's getting ready to get like wrapped up and like put in like that little temporary cast. And she like holds my hand and my daughter kisses me and then I just start crying. And like I'm like, damn, like I was like maybe a centimeter, maybe an inch, who knows, like off from like taking a round to the face and being done. And like I would have widowed my wife. My daughter would have grew up without a dad. And that's when like the whole world just like fell on me. And now it was like I was thinking like, was it worth it? So like now I'm like fighting myself, like I can't believe I did this to them. I can't believe I put them through this. I can't believe like what's going on with this guy? Like, did they find him? Did they do all this stuff? I'm gonna close this door real quick. So I'm thinking like I just have so much going on through my head, and like I'm like my head just feels like if you've ever seen Star Wars when they jump to hyperspace and like you just see the stars flying by, that's like all these thoughts. And like I'm just like I'm presently like I'm physically there, but like my presence was not there. Like my mind was elsewhere. Like I was off this planet in another galaxy, like thinking about everything. And like I just doctors coming in, like moving me, like messing with my hand, like swabbing my face, detectives coming in, taking pictures of my hands, taking pictures of like my face. Like everything. Like it was just so much. And like my wife and daughter are right there and like they're calling my family and like telling them like, hey, like we're at the hospital, like we're gonna know more, we're waiting on the doctors, like we're waiting on all this. Like I heard everything and I saw it, but I couldn't engage and interact with it because I was just trying to process all this. Um and I don't know, like this is where like that night was a big shift because of like my like how I would grow, like I would exponentially grow as a human from that moment because like I needed to be better because I needed to like prevent like I got really close, like death was on my doorstep and I got really close to like being expired. Like how do I get better? Like I thought I was good, like I thought I had trained, I thought I was like I was ready. And like it could have went sideways. And I I'm like waiting for like, the sheriff to come in, waiting for like captains to come visit me, like thinking that they're gonna come. Like the hospital wouldn't even give me pain meds because the sheriff's policy was for like our insurance to like cover our medical bills, we had to do a drug test before we could get any painkillers. Um, and it was part of like the whole internal affairs investigation. So like I'm in like crazy amount of pain and like I'm waiting to like get some meds. And it took like hours for like this on call like person from like a third party company to come out there, like get me to pee in a cup, get me to like send my pee off to the lab and be like, okay, he's good. Now he can have pain meds. And they're like, all right. Like, so now they could give me meds. They gave me meds and like, I'm just like not in a good space. And they're like, all right, send him home. And then my wife's like, is like none of his chain of command gonna come here and like make sure he's okay? And they're like, oh no, they're all busy with like other stuff. So then they just like they process me and like later on that next morning I get discharged and I go home and like uh I'm like, what do I do? And she's like, you want to sleep? You want to talk? And like I remember sitting at our table and like she's just looking at me like, oh, like we fly out tomorrow. Because we were gonna have like 1 day of vacation to like at the house to like organize everything prior to flying out. And so like we're trying to figure it out. And we're like, what do we do? Maybe we try and like change the flights. It's like I don't know. And like I'm just like I felt like she wanted to talk to like make sure like I could express my feelings. But here I am. I'm too alpha to express my feelings. Like, I just got in a gunfight. Like, you don't know. Like, you're just my wife. Like, looking back on it, I feel really bad because like I diminished her feelings. Like it was
Mhm.
like I was so in my own thoughts and in my own feelings. Like I feel bad that I did this to you, but I don't feel bad about like not communicating with you right now. Like I'm just gonna bottle. I'm gonna close out. Like you're not allowed to feel what I'm feeling right now.
I wonder how many veterans or military members, because there is I believe that there's a bit of a cultural shift taking place in some parts of the military, but where marriage might be prioritized a little bit more. I don't I'm not I'm not I don't actually have the grounds to speak on it, but
Um,
it's interesting that you say that you are robbing her of the opportunity to feel a certain way.
yeah, like looking back on it, like I feel like we have a hard time realizing it, like, we like, in the military, like, that mindset of where it's instilled is like, "Oh, your wife just sits at home with the kids and spends all your money and, like, all this stuff, and, like, she's a dependent, and she doesn't have the right to feel certain ways," and, uh, it's like, it's not her rank, it's your rank, and, like, all that stuff, and I get that to extents, but, like, I feel like we all do a very bad job at, like, honoring the sacrifices that the wives bear for us to be able to go in and day out and, like, send us off to battle.
Yeah, well, I think some of that is bureaucracy and some of that is the individual. And it's very true that it's easy to kind of push off at home responsibilities because of the urgency of the next deployment or the urgency of the next thing that has to happen. And you get driven from urgent event to urgent event to urgent event, neglecting something at home. And then there's also the military, which is, because it's a bureaucracy, is incapable of functionally creating community amongst people because it's a bureaucracy. You're asking something to do what it can't do. However, I do think that a lot of military members, or many of us, myself included, at different times, I don't know. I don't know actually. It just seems like we know it's bullshit, but we do it anyway. And so in that sense, we just it needs to stop. For the sake of your family. It should we'd want change, and I'm gonna step on not gonna step on toes. My wife and I have developed a relationship over the last 8 years where when I'm gonna go out and do something silly, we talk about it first, and that is strange. But when I say I'm gonna go out and do something silly, I mean I'm gonna go I'm gonna go do something that involves potential danger, and I feel like I'm very thankful for what she does in those times, even though it puts her into a stressful position. Because what if I don't come home? Who will take care of everything else, or even the emotional connection? But um, okay, I'm just listening. You have me entrapped. Carry on.
So, I feel like as as all that's taking place and transpiring, like, I'm, like, consciously aware that I'm doing it, but, like, isn't a part of me, like, is like, "Hey, you're doing this, but, like, you need to stop," but then you don't stop, and it just grows, and so, like, new, more mature version of me, like, when I see myself or feel that I'm going that way, like, I have to find time to pause. I need to take a tactical pause, find a lull in whatever's going on to make sure I don't do that to her anymore or do that to my kids.
Specifically, that being shutting them off and not giving them opportunity to express
Eh,
how they
how
feel to
they
you.
feel or how a situation that may have happened to me made them feel. Um,
Oh yeah.
so, like, it's not this like, again, like I mentioned this earlier, it's not this big kumbaya, like, love thing, like, no, but, like, they have every right to feel certain ways, and I want them to feel comfort in knowing that I provide, uh, a place for them to come to me and express their feelings, and that they have just as much entitlement to feel, be compassionate, or express concern about things. And I think that's why I'm still married. Because I didn't marry, like, I wasn't from the middle of America and just married a girl so I could move out of the barracks and like get BAH. Like a lot of my buddies that got married early in the military, they're not married anymore. They're probably on their second or third marriage. Like I knew like I was gonna get married once. And if it didn't work out, I was never gonna get married again. Um the whole goal behind it is like I'm gonna be all in. It's all in or nothing. So part of that is like trying to be more mature, try and listen and try and provide the best version of myself. Like I said, like I came from divorced parents, parents that weren't there. I had a broken home. So like as I've gone through life, I've whether it was the military or law enforcement, like I've met people that like filled these roles of like a strong male figure of like what a man should be, the principles and characters of a man. And I've taken these things that I've seen from them and I've collected them. And I'm like, I'm going to try and embody a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And like, I'm not a perfect man by any means, but like, I will admit that like I have my shortcomings, but I strive to provide a better version of myself each day. Learn from yesterday's lessons. Um, and I feel like our community could really benefit from that. Um, I feel like that is why, like I said earlier, like I plug my friends, like I plug these people because like I see good men doing good things and that deserves to be praised rather than like the controversy of like the community of like, oh, did you see so and so did this dramatic thing? Like like we can hold that accountable, but we don't have to give that the same attention that the good things deserve.
I agree with this one for sure, right? There are bad things that happen in our community because we are human, we are fallible, but that's not the thing that we need to focus all our attention on. If you're going, I gave this bit of advice a long time ago, like if you're moving from one controversy to another, from one dramatic event to another dramatic event, then you're gonna you don't, this is not the place for you. Is probably
Yeah.
the way of saying. I don't know if that's not the right answer though. It's like, but I want to take it not a step back, but a kind of grab onto it. Earlier, you talked about when you were training before the shooting, that you had this mentality of becoming better and pursuing excellence in what you do.
Yep.
And in our world, it's very easy to it's much easier to look at that as shooting, medical, first aid, single hand drills, down shooter, like all this kind of stuff, right? It's kit, it's gear, it's training, it's reps, it's practice, it's a mentality, it's a mindset. But then you told your story and you took that mindset of every day a little bit better and you applied it to your family. And you started talking about the way that you think about your relationships with your wife and your kids, and to a lesser extent the community, as something that you improve on, you try to improve on a little bit. And I find that view novel, new, in the way that you articulated it. Some a part of me wonders if that was intentional, because it's a like, we spend all this time thinking about getting better over here with the skills and the guns and the training and the equipment, but we spend very little time getting better over here with the family and the church and the community and the, maybe not even the community, that's too vague.
I don't it's a very intentional, like that's how I want to be, but I didn't intentionally plan for the words to come out that way. Like it's just because I do it, and when I explain how I do it, that's how it falls into place.
Yeah.
Um,
From a story, from when I'm saying storytelling, I'm not talking about fiction. I'm
oh
talking
no,
about
no, no, you're
from
good.
from a storytelling arc. That's what you delivered in that conversation, is that you started with attention to detail and training and skill set towards the violent encounter, and then after the violent encounter, it was that same mentality of making improvements and aiming after something admirable. But it was no longer. It just was. It was about you brought your family and your relationships into that metaphor. That set of values. That set of values. You applied that one set of values over here to something over here, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad I was able to do that.
I I,
Um,
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so obviously, like that part of my life was pretty hectic. It went from a task force getting spun up to them actually finding the suspects and apprehending them, and them actually seeing that the suspects were in fact uh, hit by those rounds. Obviously, the way ballistics work, when by the time the rounds went in the car and hit in the seat, like the female suspect she was banged up, but she wasn't like I didn't blow holes through her and she was messed up. But my rounds served a purpose. The male individual and her were both apprehended. They were both their wounds were addressed and taken care of. They were the vehicle was recovered, the weapon was recovered. Uh, Unbeknownst to me at the time, he was actually wanted for murder. So he didn't want to go back to jail, and going back to jail, I was the only thing that stood between him and freedom.
Yeah. Well,
He was actually a full-fledged member of the Aryan Brotherhood.
no way.
Yeah, so like they have hybrid gangs. So like the hybrid of the Aryan Brotherhood is like they were called the Ghostface Gang.
Hmm.
We won't get into all that stuff. He recently, like the trial just concluded. He's serving 25 plus years for his involvement with me. And then he's serving a life sentence for the murder that he committed prior to our encounter. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know what plea deal she got. I didn't fly back for the whole court trial. But she got a substantial sentencing as well. But now, fast forwarding into like me going home, me going with family, and like me like falling into the rhythm of things. Now, like a seed has been planted of like, hey, like this is my family. Like this is like my wife's ability to like go see her family and go see things. And so, like in this time period, like I'm just quiet and observing, and I'm like, I still I want to go back. Like I want to get better. Like my hands all banged up. Like I need to get better, go through recovery, get back after it, like learn what I've learned from this battle, um, and apply it day in and day out, and just strive to consistently get better. Um, but when I return back, keep in mind, like I'm a rookie cop. I get back and people are like, "Man, I saw your body cam. Like, I saw your video. Like Sergeant so and so or Corporal so and so showed you like part of your body cam, dude. Like, you did really good one handed. Like, that's crazy. Like, do you train that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "I would have never have thought to do that. Like, I don't know how you stayed in the fight." And then like I went back and saw like my instructor from the academy, the guy that was like, "Hey, like you need to be the best version of yourself." He's like, "Man, like I didn't see the video, but I heard from so and so like I'm glad you stayed in the fight. Like I'm glad you pushed through your injuries, you pushed through your pain, and you were able to put rounds on bad guys to survive."
Yeah.
And so then like all of a sudden people that dismissed me or made fun of me for like carrying gear or like doing certain things, they actually like were like, "Hey man, like oh nice to finally meet you." I'm like, "I've seen you like 100, 200, 300 times before, and like you never wanted to shake my hand, you never wanted to meet me." Like I had guys with like 15, 20 years in the department that like did not give a fuck about me until like I survived that. And then now all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, like maybe that stupid shit that he does, like training, actually means something."
Yeah.
And then like like no bullshit, like I'd get like people would hit me up being like, "When are we going to the range? Like when are we gonna shoot? Like what are we gonna do? Like I want to shoot with you." And then like all of a sudden, like, I was one of the guys that were, like, people wanted to, like, be around, and so then I was like, "Oh," like, I didn't let it get to my head, I was like, "I didn't like when they, like, shunned me out, but I'm not gonna shun them out, I'm gonna show them that, like, I'm gonna open the door to them,
We
and
can
if
be better, yeah.
yeah, if I could sway them and change their thought process, maybe I could get them to change their friend's thought process, and maybe I can make this a better environment where we could all be better." Um, and so that's what I did, but at the same time, like, I was looking at, like, I need to leave this department because, like, I had a sheriff that didn't care. Around that same time period, I had a buddy that responded to a disturbance in a hotel, and, he tried to, like, escort, this delirious man out of the hotel, and that man actually stabbed my coworker, and then my coworker was forced to shoot him, and so that happens, and then shortly after that, a girl I went to the academy went to, like, a noise complaint and went to inspect, like, an apartment complex for a noise complaint, and that turned into a shooting, and, like, where they shot at her, but she never even drew her gun out, like, we fall to our lowest common denominator of training, like, her stand like, and this isn't me being mean because it's a girl, but, like, she didn't train, she didn't, like, hold herself to a standard, and when bad guy shot at her, she ran around the corner and cried and didn't pull her gun out, and, um, and that happens to people, like, if I didn't have the reps to draw one-handed and pull out my gun, um, would I have had that lowest common denominator to, like, pull out my handgun when I needed it? Um, so, like,
Well,
I always say, like, "Oh, I could do better," like,
you
that
said it you told when you were telling your story that you didn't notice your hand was broken until you drew your handgun. And
mhm.
so, maybe it's not so much of a wherewithal thing, but if you don't it kinda goes back to what you were saying earlier. If, you don't know how to use it, if you're not confident in being able to use it, then it creates a bad outcome. A lack
Yeah,
of self-confidence in this case is actually like produces a bad outcome, and that is a hard pill for, I think, some people to swallow, and I have been the pre-digested side of that as well, but there are cases where a lack of confidence is a liability,
yeah.
and for you to instill that, even in that case, I think the proof is in the pudding, but it does make sense there. I think there's something to be said on how some people will advocate for violence because they don't know anything about it, and then others, when they're put in this situation, will not. It's good. I'm rambling now.
No, no, you're good, but, so, like, I would say the next year,
Hmm.
uh, I'm, like, figuring out, like, am I gonna apply elsewhere? Am I gonna try out for the SWAT team? Like, am I gonna try and do this? So, like, I was, like, pretty much trying to get my feet and everything. Um, like, I was kinda, like, scatterbrained. I didn't know, like, I knew that I, like, wanted to, like, be better, and so, like, I was looking at all these avenues of how I could hope to achieve being better.
Hmm.
Um, and I had seen a lot of friends get hurt. I had seen a lot of friends get betrayed. But the one common thing that I had seen was the lack of empathy from leadership in the head shed there. Um, and I had attended funerals of a coworker. I attended a funeral of a coworker that lost his life in the line of duty. Someone that, like, I didn't agree with absolutely 100%, but they were a more seasoned guy that had been around the block um, that I had learned a lot of good from. I had also learned bad from, but I took away more good from him than anything else, and he didn't deserve to go out the way he went out, and that was kinda like that reinforced everything. That reinforced, like, all the training, all the hard work I was putting in, all that to be like, "Hey, like, it's time you leave. It's time you look elsewhere." So around that time period, I had applied, and, looking at just coming closer to California to be closer to family, just in case something happened again. But I ultimately didn't want to move to California because um I was a young adult spending money on guns, buying suppressors, buying lasers, buying night vision, and I was like, I can't have this in California. California is off the list of options. So we grew up coming to the river in Arizona, like Lake Havasu and stuff. And I was like, let's move to Arizona. Arizona's a cool place. Like I have no bad memories of Arizona. So I put in, get the job offer. I don't want to get into like what department. I left on bad terms, but moral of the story is I come to Arizona. I start off going to same thing. Like I'm still like back to the military. Like it's just a new unit essentially. So I'm learning to be like the new guy all over again. So I have experience. I have all these tools, but no one gives a shit. Like to everyone else is like, who's this new guy? Like, oh, where did he come from? Oh, well, none of that matters because we're better. We're better than his last department because if his last department was better, he wouldn't have left there to come here. Like that's the mentality. Um, so I get to my new department. I'm here 6.5 months. Uh, and I wind up in my second shooting. And it's funny. Just being the gun gear guy nerd that I am. Uh, I was sitting like near the county line here in my respected area for my department, and I'm on my phone watching one of the seasons of SEAL Team. And like I'm looking at their gear and I'm like, sick, nice. Like just like middle of the night, just waiting. And then like I like kind of hear the radio and I'm like, what the heck was that? And I turn up the radio and it's like it's one of the guys that's in the county beneath us coming up with that sheriff's department. And he's like, hey, just so you guys are aware, we're in pursuit of a vehicle that just tried to kill a deputy. So we're headed up in your guys' direction if you guys want to start making preparations for it. Um, so I'm like, oh dang, like I'm like, this is it. Put my phone down. Like they had already explained to us that like he had already shot at multiple officers. He was all over the road. Like it was gonna end. Like someone was gonna get shot. Those were the only options that were left on the table. So I end up getting becoming one of the lead vehicles. I end up getting real close to him, and I'm running radio communications with our higher ups. Like we're making sure, like first and foremost, that there's like no undocumented aliens that are in the back of the vehicle, like no UDAs. Because like if we have to run this vehicle off the road, we don't want to hurt people that don't need to be hurt. Um, and I remember like I'm like running parallel with this guy. And I just remember seeing his hand come up towards me. Like, I just see this. And I couldn't tell if he had a gun or not, but like it was enough to like make me hit my brakes and get behind him and like notify everyone of that, like, hey, I think this guy's still armed. We end up chasing him. He ends up wrecking out and he ends up running into a dealership. And we all pull in. It's like a sea of police cars. And he actually takes the two janitor staff that are there at night hostage. And like I remember like the dealership gates are closed. He crashed into back one of the gates and ran into the dealership. And I remember like parking along the main like road outside the dealership. And I'm like running with my rifle. The way we keep our rifles in our patrol cars is like magazine inserted, no round in chamber, bolt forward, weapon on safe. So like I remember like I like as soon as I got out of the car, I like racked one and I was like, I'm ready to go. And as I was like sprinting across the parking lot, at some point, like I bumped my mag release. So I remember when I got to the wall of like the dealership and it's all this like glass paneling and I'm behind this pillar and I like put my rifle on and like I'm like looking and adjusting my red dot, like so I'm ready to go. And I look down and I don't see my mag. And I'm like, oh fuck. Like it is a surreal feeling when like you're like I'm severely fucked in this situation. like I was like, I am not going to be making any dents in the workload that needs to be done. And I look over, and like one of like the guys that like I had worked with stumbles over to our the pillar that I'm behind, and I look down at his belt. He's a bigger dude. Uh, I see a belt, or I see a magazine for a rifle mag on his belt, and I was like, snatch it, and I like feed the mag in, and I'm like, yeah. And he looked at me and was like, make sure I get that back. And I was like, yeah, you get it back. And that's where I got my like my Instagram name, Magjack.
Magjack. Makes sense now.
So I jacked his mag. I don't know the exact time from that conversation taking place to us and breaching the gate on the side of the building to like actually like make way and attempt to apprehend this guy. But ultimately, the decision was made. Very dynamic situation to breach the gate and attempt to go in there. A lot of the departments that had responded to that were like, "Hey, you guys are not allowed to go in." So it was my department. We went in like a tactical column, and then we had the PD that used their undercover truck to breach the gate, and because it had a bull bar on the front, and then we had the sheriff's office that initiated the pursuit with him. So like it's two tac columns moving in line with this vehicle, and like we're gonna maneuver around this vehicle if we have to engage him. So we breach the side gate, and the individual like ends up getting the keys to one of the vehicles in the back bay that's being maintenance. Like this vehicle is brand new, just purchased. Like the owner takes delivery tomorrow, kind of thing. And he ends up freeing the hostages and attempts to drive out and like ram us in the patrol car. And I remember like I had two guys in the column in front of me, are in the stack. And I remember seeing them dive out of the way as this car's like bolting towards us. And I just come up, and it's crazy. In my first shooting, we won't get into like the whole, I won't say anything that can be misconstrued and used against me, but there's point shooting, and then there's shooting where you can actually see your optic. This shooting was different than my last shooting. Um, I had I remember coming up and actually seeing my red dot like come up with my muzzle and actually like land on the individual. So like I knew wholeheartedly like I was on him. And it was in that moment that like it was just like again like that boom gunfight, like multiple guns going off. Um I I remember it in like almost like slow motion. Like I remember seeing the windshield crack, and I remember seeing blood go up on the windshield. And then I remember seeing the car swerve, and the car attempt to like run over some guys. They jump out of the way. The car swerve to like try and hit other guys, and then the car ultimately crashing into some vehicles and then swerving again and coming into its final rest.
Well,
And it's
what kind of car was it? Like, was it a sports
it was
car?
like
Was it
an SUV.
an SUV? Okay.
Yeah, like easily would have killed dozens of us. But uh at this time I remember like now it's like we it was quick. Like we engaged this guy. This guy swerved. Like we're checking on like injured people. Some of the because we were like the way it was set up and like people were moving and shooting and this vehicle was like trying to maneuver between us. It was super hectic. And rounds are like flying and hitting metal and like rounds are ricocheting and like the dude behind me took jacketing to the cheekbone.
Okay.
And so like he actually has like a jacket from the projectile like deep inside his cheekbone, and like I could see blood just running down his face. And then the other dude, like when that car swerved past us and everyone goes to like track the car to like attempt to engage. I don't know what had happened, but the other dude behind me, uh he took jacketing to the arm.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh shit, like I don't know who did what to who, but like some people pointed muzzles at each other
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
in the
Not
general
not a
direction. And
not
like
quite like a Polish ambush, but definitely the know your back, know what you're shooting and what's behind it.
Yeah, and it was crazy because it went from like, okay, now all the cops that are back there that weren't allowed to come in and do like all the cool, sexy shit, like now they're like sighted in on that target, attempting to do that, and then like we're hearing radio chatter like officer down, um, and we're hearing that like an officer's been hit. We didn't know what was hit. I look over at these two guys next to me, and or like I look over at the guy that was right behind me, and he has a jacket and out of his face, and like he's now freaking out because he's like, oh my god, like I just got shot in the face. And there's guys that like are mentally prepared for that, and then there's guys that aren't. And
There's
then like
guys, yeah, very
um
true.
so I remember like one of the guys that was in that group that was originally in front of me, he runs up to the other department and he's like, hey, we have to use your car. And they're like, no, 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 we got to go over there, we're going to use this car for cover over there. They're like, no, like we have to ram gates to get out of here because there's all these like parked cars. We're at a dealership.
Hmm.
Like we need to get out and get to the main road where like all the fire department's staging because the fire department can't come in to provide any aid. And we need to get these guys out. So it was like the scariest, like cool factor. Like now I'm a little bit more seasoned. This is like my second gunfight. Um, but like now it's like the role or change. Like we're throwing people in the back of this truck and like we're attempting to like force our way out. So like I remember, like I don't remember who's driving, but I remember like we rammed multiple vehicles, like brand new cars, like just like trying to like clear our way. Like it's like the footage of like the old Iraq convoys that just were told to not stop at any means possible.
Yeah,
Uh,
just
yeah, just plow your way through it. And so like we're plowing our way through. And like I remember like my buddies like staying calm talking to the one guy that got hit in the face, and he's crying. He's like, I can't see, like my eye is shut, like his face was swollen, and he was bleeding a lot. And I remember like I was yelling like as we're leaving, and I was like, who has a med kit? And I remember getting tossed a med kit like through the crowd. And I get one and I just start opening it. And my buddy, like my other buddy's holding this guy, and this guy's crying, like he thinks he's gonna die. Like
mhm,
he wholeheartedly like has written it off. He's making utterances of like, tell my wife I love her, I'm sorry, like I
mhm,
apologize, like I just want her to know I love her. The other dude that's in the arm is like, he's just like not even there. Like these guys are freaking out. And like I'm like, oh, like you don't really ever plan to like pack a face wound. So like I'm like ripping this med kit apart, like looking for something, and I'm like I need to attempt to like put some form of compression on this, and like in the moment, like I'm just like watching, like I felt like that scene in Act of Valor where the one SEAL gets shot in the face,
it's
and
been
like
a long, long time, and I don't remember.
so they're like in a little like beat up pickup truck like in South America, like breaking contact, and like one of their brothers is wounded, and like I felt like I was in that, like but I remember taking this H bandage and like putting it on his face and just wrapping the H bandage and like sucking it to his face and like compressing him.
Mhm,
And like I remember like I'm like, you're good, you're good. And this guy's like crying, and like he's convinced he's a lost cause. And like I remember him like just bloody like coming up and giving me like a thumbs up, and we're gonna get you help. And like he's like it's just starting to like trigger in his head, like these guys are like they're trying to take care of me, like they're not gonna, they're putting their best conscious effort to like make sure like I get to live another day. um and so like I remember that glimmering like shining light of like just his little bloody thumb coming out at me, and like him giving me a thumbs up, and like all this crazy commotion still going on because their dogs are barking, sirens are going, people are yelling, and like as we're like driving out of this like just sea of mangled cars and cop cars and everything, I remember seeing like my supervisor at the time, and he sees me in this car and like he's like, where are you going? And like I'm like leaning up, like holding my rifle, and like I have his blood on me, and I'm like, we have injured dudes, like we're going, like. And he's like, oh, okay. So he's running to the scene, we're getting them to the fire department, and like the fire department's getting told like you guys will not go in there. You guys are not allowed to drive the fire trucks in there. They do not have this guy in custody yet. Like we don't know if he's still armed, if he's putting up a fight. Like no. And these firemen are all looking at each other like fuck it. Like if we get fired, we get fucking fired. But we're
Yeah.
not gonna let dudes get hurt. And so now they know their fire trucks aren't gonna fit in there. They're throwing their stretchers and they're throwing their med bags in the back of this truck that we just used to pull our injured out. And these dudes are like, fucking take us to the fight. Like, we need help. And it was fucking crazy. It was like, I have never been able to experience so many people from so many different teams and organizations and departments and backgrounds, like that had never fucking trained with each other, fucking come together in this mass chaotic once in a lifetime event and fucking so many people rise to the occasion. And like I saw so many moments of like absolute heroism, absolute valor, absolute like self-sacrifice. Like it was in that moment that I felt like I had been baptized. Like I felt like I had seen um what I was always expressed to, like when I would hear my senior leadership talk in the military about like fucking talking about walking amongst giants.
Yeah.
And like like I'm sure you've seen it. It's such a surreal feeling that like will last with you a lifetime, and like it's crazy. Like it's the most badass thing I think a fucking man can ever be a part of. I think that's why like the 2A community, like a lot of people get shit on for like wearing kit and being prepared citizens and stuff, but it's like
Sure. Yeah.
I used to think that, but now I don't think that anymore. And because I don't
Oh.
I don't think that because um it's like when I was a little kid. And I'm not saying that they're little kids and I'm not trying to diminish them, and maybe I don't know have a good way to put this, but I see what they want. And I once upon a time wanted that too. They want to be prepared. They want to be prepared for the day that they get their calling to rise to their occasion, whether that be an armed citizen or whether that be a prepared citizen. They want to be skilled in a craft that
Mm-hmm.
not many men are skilled in anymore, and they want to provide the best version of themselves to whether protect their community, their family, or their team, whatever it may be. So like when I see dudes spending money on kit, when I see dudes using their kit, when I see like dudes making fun hype boy videos, like I think it's doing good for the community within reason. I think
Yeah. I mean,
I
there's
think it's telling people that like we need to break the stigmatism of like we should all own this and we should all know how to use it, and we shouldn't shit on the people that spend their hard-earned money on this. Like don't go financially bankrupt for it, but like live within your means. But if you have something, know how to use it and help. I feel like if we did a better job, like it shouldn't be scary like when a guy pulls out a suppressed rifle or if a guy has a plate carrier or whatever. Like citizens should just be like, we're America and we're an armed country, and like it's normal for dudes to be rolling to the gas station with a belt fed. um
yeah. Well, we'll get into belt fed preferences later. I think I see different places where that's evident and evident in attitudes changing for sure. And to add maybe a little bit of my flavor on it. No, that's not the right way of saying it. One thing that I think is important is an example where this can be made very apparent is in religious institutions, churches, synagogues, and so on and so forth. In that, for the longest time, I've observed, particularly even churches, kind of view take the kind of whole security thing for granted. For example, if a church needs a plumbing job, they call a plumber and they pay the plumber to repair the plumbing. or if the church needs a window fixed, or an electrical socket rewired, or a kitchen built, they pay. Oftentimes it might be someone who attends the church, but they pay that person to do the job. But then when it comes to the concept of like looking out for the health and well-being and security and safety of the church, it's either like they want you to do it for free. An off-duty police officer will sit in the for free, or it's always for free. And it's like, and I think that the mentality is one example of where it probably should change. Now, the evidence in what our community desires, though, is that even if they're not paid, people still volunteer to do that. Sometimes not even publicly, but they'll just, when they go to church, they're going to carry a firearm and they're going to pay attention to what's going on because they care about their community. And I think we are about to open up a giant, long conversation that we should hold on for another time. We'll cliffhanger the hell out of this one.
Sweet, sounds good.
Because I want to hear you. I want to hear you talk about that in the future, especially when it comes to like I'm saturated in this environment. Plate carriers and suppressors are normal for me, and I will never be unsaturated from it. And I don't mind people. I enjoy it when people make hype videos and do stuff on social media, and try to make movies and figure all that kind of stuff out. I enjoy that because that's in some ways that's what I do as well. But
Yeah.
since starting Redacted and starting this podcast, it remains eminently clear that we do not do what we do because of some fear of the future or concern for the apocalypse. People in our community carry a firearm and learn how to be capable of use of force because they believe it is the right thing to do, that it is a moral obligation of an individual to be capable of such things and knowledgeable. And that should be a beacon of hope to our culture, that the people that are shit on for their capabilities are the very people whose moral output is what sustains the rest of it. And that can sound a little assertive, but I rest my case. When I lived in Minneapolis when the riots kicked off, and the very same people who very publicly professed being pro gun control and pro whatever turned out to all be racist bigots, because as soon as their life felt concerned, they wanted you to go get them a gun, or they wanted me to do it. But then when it came to the possession of firearms, and as things cooled down, it was like, well, why I would ask the question of like, well, if you still support gun control, why do you own a firearm? It's like, oh, it's not for me, it's for them. And that was it. It was it. It was just they believed that they were better men and they deserved guns. And it was like, thank God no one gave them a hand up when they needed it, because that's a horrible mentality.
Yeah. No.
But
absolutely.
instead, we learned to I thank you for going through the length and detail of your story. I want to hear more. I want to have another conversation with you, but I think it would be appropriate to call it for today.
Sweet.
But so let's start with a couple of important things of like where are you at now, and where can people find you, and what are you up to as far as
So
you don't need to do like the opposite thing. You don't need to tell me your address or anything, but like
no. So I'm here in the valley. I'm in the southeast portion of the Valley of Arizona. So like Gilbert, Clean Creek, Santan kind of area.
we're not far
Uh,
from each other.
no, not at all. We got to go shoot. Got to
Let's do
do a
it.
high boy video.
You
Uh,
want to, if you come down here, when was the last time you went rappelling?
uh, Bridgeport Mountain Warfare School.
Do you want to do like a rappel off the side of a cliff at night with nods and shoot a target at 200 yards or 150 maybe? I think
I'm
we can get
extra
100.
down for that. Yeah, we actually have a really good spot that we could rappel out here. It's just like I don't have anyone else that's rappelled or isn't like super like fresh now that I know that you are. But like I know other dudes that have been there and have rappelled, and it'd be sick. Like we have a really good spot out here where
Well, let's coordinate offline
yeah.
so that nobody is geolocating our current movements and setting, a hit on us while we're.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm out here. I'm trying to get more involved in the community. I just what was it? Saturday we just did a partnership with Badlands. They did their Badlands Bash in Gilbert at the Continental, shot a bunch of suppressed machine guns. Brought like 20 something companies together from like all over the US and just had a good time. So trying to do more of those, trying to get more involved with Thursday night steals at like either the Phoenix Rod and Gun Club near Perpa. Always looking to hang out and shoot and network. I'm like I tie it back into the family thing, but like if anyone's out here, I get DMs I wouldn't say all the time, I'm not trying to sound super popular, but I get DMs from time to time and they're like, "Hey man, like I'm out here, like I know you're somewhere in the same area based off of your photos, but like I want to like get together and shoot. Like my wife doesn't really shoot, or she might want to shoot, or like she just needs to find other wives who have friends that have husbands that shoot. Like it's kind of like have the same thing in common. So like I always try and say, hey man, like let's go shoot, and then like our wives can hang out and go get coffee or go get their nails done, and then like then when we hang out, like it's not like I'm just ditching my wife and you're just ditching your wife, but now like they get to foster a friendship, and then our kids can foster a friendship, and then what in turn that does is that strengthens a community within itself.
Yeah.
And so if anyone is ever in like the Gilbert, Queen Creek, Santan area, like feel free to like hit me up if I'm in town. We can shoot guns, we can shoot suppressors. I'm all about shooting, hanging out. If I'm not doing that, I'm probably at the BMX track with my son. He's like super into that right now, so like I try and give him that positive reinforcement.
Got it.
But
Where do people find you on social media?
the Magjack3r 23. I don't know if you want to add that on in this bio.
I can. I'll definitely put it in a link below.
Sweet.
That'll be doable. But just so for people who are listening, is it spelled as you have it on your tag here?
No, like I attempted to do it. So it's the underscore mag jacker. The 3 in jacker is or the E is actually a 3 in jacker, and then it's 2 3 at the end.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Magjack3r is all one word.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah, because we got connected at SHOT Show this year, and it's been really great. I'm thankful that you were able to come on for this long form conversation and kind of go through the whole story, but also thank you for your contribution. And if I'll close then on something that stood out for the beginning of this year is I think 2023 was a hard year for a lot of people. And 2024 is definitely the year where we change from let's do this together to here I am, send me, and where can we volunteer and support one another and make our lives better, make our friends' lives better. And so for you, thank you for coming onto the show and talking about lessons you've learned and some things that have happened in your whether it's leadership or relationships and family and development. And in that sense, thank you. So I really appreciate it, and for connecting with me at SHOT Show. And we'll connect after the show and we'll talk. Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate you taking the time having me on here. I hope our conversation just connects to someone and helps them in somehow.
Yeah. Well, I for one am edified by it. So thank you very much. Well, then, in closing, if you want to support the show, if you want to support what we're doing, for those who are still listening right now, if you want to, if you want to give us a leg up, you can always help us out. Keep food on the table. You can go over to redactedllc.com. That is where we have our store, and then you can go to redactedculture.locals.com to join in our conversations behind the scenes, where I input opportunities that might not fit well on other social media platforms, and we have opportunities for discussion on that. There's always the Dead Drop you can join into, which is our newsletter, and I try to get a newsletter out once a month, letting you know what's going on and what's coming up. And if you're in the Arizona area, April 6th of 2024, we are doing a public land cleanup and range down here. Information is available on the new tab on the website at redactedllc.com, and I believe it says /events. But if you go to the website, you can find it from there. But hey, Nick, thank you very much for this conversation. Now that I've gotten my buzz out, I thank you for talking about the different components of vulnerability in and capability of violence, because you certainly one I think would not be complete without the other. Vulnerability without capability seems to be more like just weakness, and then capability without vulnerability is something else. So thank you, and we'll sign out. So for everyone else who's listening, in conclusion, go forth and conquer. This has been the Redacted Culture Cast.